Imagine the world 66 million years ago. The air was thick with warmth, forests towered with giants, rivers shimmered under skies filled with winged shadows. Dinosaurs ruled every continent, their footsteps like living thunder, their cries echoing across valleys that seemed eternal. But then, silence began to stir. Picture this. The screen fades to black. For a heartbeat, the earth itself seems to hold its breath. Then, a single streak of light tears across the heavens, brighter than the moon, fiercer than the sun. A comet, a cosmic intruder, a messenger of change. It plunges toward the Gulf of Mexico at unimaginable speed. In the final moments, the sky ignites as if dawn has been ripped open too early. The paradox of that instant is staggering. The end of the dinosaurs wasn't just an ending, it was the violent beginning of something entirely new. With one impact, one heartbeat of cosmic violence, entire kingdoms of creatures vanished. Yet in that destruction lay the seeds of our own story. Without that comet, there would be no us to tell this tale. Close your eyes and imagine the ground, convulsing. Oceans rise as if boiling. A wall of fire taller than mountains races outward from the impact site, flattening forests, incinerating everything in its path. Dinosaurs, once lords of the earth, scatter in confusion, their roars lost. In the roar of a planet breaking, and then, quiet. Not peace, but the eerie quiet of something ending. Smoke coils upward, blotting out the sun. Shadows stretch across every continent. The age of light has collapsed into the age of darkness. The paradox deepens. What seems like the final curtain is also the opening act. A stage reset, violent but necessary. Without this cosmic event, mammals would have stayed small, insignificant, trapped beneath the feet of giants. But with it, destiny shifted. And so the question lingers, unsettling, yet irresistible. What world truly emerged in the silence that followed? Picture the forests first. Ancient pines and cycads, green and lush, suddenly become torches. Ash clouds choke the skies, turning day into endless night. Firestorms sweep across continents with the speed of hurricanes, fueled by debris raining down from the heavens. Imagine standing in that inferno, though no human was there to witness it. The very air burns. Oxygen feeds a global firestorm so vast it consumes nearly everything living above ground. Animals collapse mid-run. Rivers boil in their beds. Insects vanish in clouds of ash. It should have been the end of all life. A planet engulfed by fire should leave no survivors, and yet life is stubborn. In the ashes, seeds of the future are being sown. This is the paradox. Destruction fertilizes creation. The burned forests will one day give rise to meadows, jungles, and plains teeming with new forms of life. Ash becomes soil, fire becomes foundation. Death prepares the ground for birth. Science tells us that more than 75% of species vanished in those moments. Dinosaurs, pterosaurs, giant marine reptiles, gone. But while the mighty perished, the small endured. Underground, beneath roots and stones, tiny mammals, frogs, insects, and seeds clung to survival. Imagine them huddled in darkness as the world above turned to cinders. Burrows glowing faintly with the heat of fire, yet still safer than open ground. A mother mammal curls around her young, breath shallow, body trembling, waiting for the storm to pass. What did this silence feel like? Was it terror or opportunity? Here lies the haunting paradox. The very apocalypse that ended the age of dinosaurs opened the door for the age of humans. Without those flames, there would be no you, no me, no voices to ask these questions in the dead of night. And so we must wonder, how could death prepare the way for life? Now picture the fires dying down. Imagine walking through forests reduced to blackened skeletons of trees, landscapes littered with the carcasses of creatures too large to escape. And above, nothing. No sun. The sky is a ceiling of ash. Clouds of soot circle the globe, thicker than storms, darker than night. They block sunlight for months, maybe years. Photosynthesis stops. Plants wither. Oceans cool, and ice begins to creep across once warm coasts. The earth is cloaked in an eternal winter. Temperatures plunge, rivers freeze, oceans crust with ice. In this sudden night, survival is nearly impossible. Yet here is the paradox again. A planet that seems uninhabitable still whispers with survival beneath the cold. Picture the mammals, still tiny, fur bristling against the chill. They gnaw on roots, seeds, and insects, storing what little warmth they can. Picture turtles buried deep in mud, their bodies slowed to near death, waiting out the freeze. Picture fish beneath the ice, alive in a world that seems dead. It's a fragile persistence, but it is enough. The giants who once shook the ground are gone. But the small, the overlooked, the invisible, endure. And as the months stretch on and years pass, the ash begins to settle. Slowly, cautiously, light returns. Plants sprout where ash has become fertile soil. Life edges back into the open. But this winter carved something permanent into Earth's story. It showed that survival is not about size, not about strength, but about adaptation. The rulers of the past could not withstand the cold. The small, the hidden, the humble, they became the architects of tomorrow. And so the haunting question arises. Who managed to cling to existence when giants fell? Imagine digging down through the ash. Beneath the scorched earth, the planet still breathes. In cracks, caves, and tunnels, life glows faintly, stubbornly. This is where the story of survival truly continues. Mammals, no larger than rats, scurry through underground passages, feeding on seeds stored long before the disaster. Insects breed in darkness. Amphibians burrow into mud, slowing their heartbeat to near silence. It was not the mighty that inherited the earth, but the small. This is the paradox. The creatures least equipped to dominate the surface became the heirs of the world. Strength failed, speed failed. Even flight could not save the lords of the skies. But burrows, patience, and silence succeeded. Picture a cave glowing faintly with fungi feeding on decay. Small mammals huddle in the warmth, eyes wide, bodies pressed together. They do not roar, they do not dominate, they simply wait. And in that waiting lies survival. From these shadows came the future. Every human being alive today carries the inheritance of those who endured underground. The ability to adapt, to persist through famine, through silence, through despair. It was born in those burrows. And so we must ask, what did these forgotten creatures see that giants missed? What secrets of survival were passed down, hidden, in instinct waiting for us to inherit? The silence beneath the earth was not empty, it was alive. And from that hidden life, the story of everything yet to come was written. Waves fold themselves against a coast stripped of color. A thin foam line breathes in and out, as regular as a sleeping animal. No gulls cry, no silver flicker breaks the surface. The beach is clean in the saddest way. No trails, no shells, no cast-off weeds, just damp sand cooling under a dull sky. Now sink your gaze beyond the shore's skin, past the ripple, past the first curl of kelp, down where sun fades into a gray-green hush. A quiet workshop has already begun. Tiny drifters stir, cells divide, threads of life link in slow motion. At the surface, everything feels emptied out. Below, careful hands are sewing. Here is the paradox. The sea looks deserted, yet it is the busiest recovery room on Earth. Silence is not the absence of life. It is the room where new life learns its lines. What the textbooks say is spare and stubborn. After the sky darkened, photosynthesis crashed. Algal blooms collapsed. Food chains thinned until they almost snapped. Then the ocean did what it has always done when the lights go low. It shifted to deeper gears. Upwelling zones ferried nutrients from cold basements back toward the surface. Microbes at vents made meals without sunlight, forging energy from minerals that leak out of the crust. As dust settled and the first light returned, plankton took the stage again. Cyanobacteria first, then diatoms with glass-like shells, then little animals that graze and get grazed in turn. Step by step, the ladder rose. Fringe ideas add a strange grace to this climb. Some researchers argue the abyss acted like a vault, stable temperatures, slow change, a place where ancient lineages rode out the worst above. Others raise the role of submarine caves and brine, pools as sanctuaries with odd chemistries that favored tough survivors. A few even suggest that cysts and dormant eggs were the ocean's seed bank, waiting for a signal, temperature easing, light ticking up, to break their sleep. Myth remembers, in its own way. Fishing peoples on different coasts tell of a season when the sea closed its eyes. Nets came up empty. The surface felt haunted. Then, without clear reason, the hush lifted and the water began feeding again. Stories are not measurements, but they share the shape of a curve our graphs now trace. Drop, long shoulder, slow return. Drift across a continental shelf in your mind. At 10 meters, light is weak tea. At 40, it's a rumor. At 100, night. In that gradient, communities reorganize. Where reefs once buzzed with color, bare skeletons collect silt, but thin films of microbes start to coat the dead. On sand plains, burrowers plow faint paths. Over vents, pale crabs and tube worms glean the heat of the earth itself, ignoring the sky's grief. Each niche writes a short chapter, and together they bind a new book. Stand again on the shore. The foam line slides over your toes and retreats. In the backwash, flecks of green cling to the sand. Broken filaments, a first harvest of cells. They look like nothing. They are everything. Within days, that thin lawn will thicken. Within weeks, grazers will find it. Within months, fish shaped like commas will chase one another in the shallows. Return in a few years and reefs will begin to sound again. The crackle of shrimp, the whisper of fins, the soft grind of parrotfish teeth. Some ask how the ocean knew to restart so cleanly. There is no counsel under the waves, only the physics of light and the chemistry of nutrients, only feedback loops older than mountains. Yet the effect wears the face of intention. A vacuum becomes a schedule becomes a city. The stillness you hear tonight is not empty. It is loading. The tide keeps time. The moon writes the tempo. The smallest voices step into their cues and rebuild the choir, note by tiny note. How did the oceans conspire to reseed the earth? The answer has started, but another clue waits on land. Under a cold moon, among wet ferns, small hearts are beating their own solution to winter and ash. Follow that rustle into the undergrowth. The next chapter runs on 4 quick feet. Moonlight lays a silver edge on broken trunks. Fern, fronds shine like wet feathers. Between them a shadow darts, then stops, then glides again. A leaf trembles, a pebble clicks, and silence returns. What moves is small, a body built for hiding and sudden choices, fur set to hold heat, paws that know roots and bark by touch. Eyes drink whatever light the night gives. This is not a throne room. It is a maze. But in this maze, the future learns how to move. The paradox at the center is simple and profound. The creatures that looked least important will inherit every forest, every plain, every branch of every tree. Not because they fought harder, but because they survived longer. Size stopped being a crown. Flexibility became law. The established view frames the shift in plain steps. With the canopy burned and the climate cooled, specialist diners starved. When plant communities changed, the picky went first. Generalists did better. Omnivores rose. The night became a better bet than the day, safer, colder, quieter, so nocturnal traits helped. Warm blood mattered. Parental care mattered. Teeth that could handle seeds, insects, eggs, and meat mattered. Good noses, good ears, short gestation, quick growth, each a small survival edge that together added up to a revolution. Now braid in. Curiosities that the margins love. Some bones hint that a few mammals nursed longer than expected for their size, investing in young during bad years. That choice costs energy up front. It pays huge dividends when the world is unstable. Some skulls show rapid changes in bite force and jaw shape within short spans of rock, as if dietary gearboxes shifted fast. There are even proposals that certain lineages used torpor or near hibernation more flexibly than we thought, throttling down their needs whenever food went thin. Stories from much later eras hold a shadow memory. In winter tales from northern peoples, small furred beings teach the larger how to survive, how to cache, how to listen for water under ice, how to sleep without dying, how to wake when the light changes. These teaching animals wear names: vole, mouse, wolverine, badger, but the lesson is older than names. Spend less, save more, be many, learn, track one night's hunt. A small omnivore leaves a burrow woven into the roots of a charred stump. Breath smokes. Paws press snow the way a whisper presses air. The animal stops at a patch where a bush once stood. Now the ground is seeded with last summer's hard fruit. Teeth test, crack, grind. A faint rustle stirs a fern to the right, an insect under bark, a quick head turn, a hop, a peel, a swallow. 2 meals, 2 sources. The animal adjusts with the ease of water finding a path. The gift that matters most in this age is not muscle, it is options. A mammal can switch lanes without stopping. That is how a small life outlasts a large collapse. As years pass, the burned ground greens. Bushes return. Trees knit canopies. The underworld of branches offers a new map. Safe travel, high pantries, leaf rafts that drip insects each dusk. Some bodies stretch into that domain. Fingers lengthen, nails flatten, tails learn balance. Eyes rotate forward just a little more. A hand reaches for a branch and closes. The forest accepts the handshake. From here, the thread to us is thin but unbroken. Brains that can trial and error without dying become rare assets. Groups that share warmth and warn one another turn cold nights into meetings instead of funerals. Vocal cords learn more notes. Faces learn expression. The same instincts that carried a shivering body through a bad winter become the scaffolding for thought. What instincts gave them the key to survival? Not nobility, not speed, not teeth alone. A wider menu, a burrow, a parent that stayed, asleep with a dimmer switch, a brain willing to change its mind. Hold that answer softly. Beyond the ferns, under a bruised dawn, bones rise from scorched ground like white question marks. They do not accuse, they invite. The next chapter asks a harder thing. What if endings are instruments? What if absence, terrible and real, still builds? A hillside washed by last year's rains opens to the sun. Here and there pale arcs show through, the curve of a rib, the hinge of a jaw, the round of a joint worn smooth by grit. The ground is a page, and the bones are letters. Read them in silence and a cold truth sets in. This body fed no one now, but it made room for thousands. To die was to clear a path. To vanish was to make room. That is the paradox that hurts and explains at once. The standard account is stark. When the impact and its aftershocks cut the light and chilled the air, a cascade followed. Plants faltered, herbivores thinned, predators toppled, specialists blinked out. The losses were huge, most species gone. Yet that subtraction freed resources. Empty niches are invitations. Newcomers stepped in and rewrote the script. In deep time, extinctions act like pruning shears. The tree looks wounded, then it flushes, with growth. Now listen to the stranger chords. Some paleontologists propose that the pruning metaphor is too gentle. What happened was closer to a reset button pressed by a clumsy hand. Chance mattered. Geography mattered. A lineage survived. Here and not there for reasons as small as a valley catching fewer ash days or a coastline catching a current that brought food back sooner. Others ask whether the crisis was not a single blow but a braid. Impact, volcanism, sea level weirdness, maybe even magnetic field fluctuations, turning the world into a test with many questions. any one of which could fail you. Myth translates the same lesson through emblem and oath. In flood stories, the world cleans itself with sorrow. In fire stories, the world burns off its lies. In winter stories, the world holds its breath until truth can be spoken again. Every cycle feels tragic to the ones within it. Every cycle opens space for what was not possible before. Walk the hillside further. Between bones, seedlings take root. Ants use a skull like a palace, moving soil through sockets, tending white larvae in dim rooms. A lizard warms itself on an old shoulder blade. A bird lands, drops a seed, leaves. The seed germinates in waste carried from far away. Death becomes a ferry. The ferry becomes a road. Look at the numbers carved into rock. Diversity plunges right after the boundary. Then in millions of years it climbs past the old high water. Mark. New families of birds rise. Mammals unfold strange forms. Hooved runners, thick-skinned giants, swimmers built like torpedoes. Forests spread, retreat, and spread again. Dry grasslands eventually take continents by surprise, and grazers invent ways to eat knives. All of it only possible because the giants who once filled every aisle of the supermarket are no longer shopping. This cruel? Yes. Is it beautiful? Yes. Does it ask love for what was lost? It does. It also asks a more complicated love for what is now allowed to be. Some say extinction is the sharpest tool in the Earth's hand, the one it uses when a design grows too rigid to bend. Others say it is not a tool at all, only the sum of collisions, between rocks and heat and time and accident. Either way the pattern holds. Collapse is a gate. Through it, the world walks out wearing a new face. Could destruction itself be nature's greatest act of creation? The words feel wrong in a mouth that still tastes smoke, but lift your eyes to the slope. Ferns wave. Beyond them, a green plain ripples under the first gentle wind of the new season. Those fronds are not decoration. They are the first engineers of the recovery to come. Follow them. Their story is older than forests and quicker than trees. The next field is a carpet of green flags claiming the ash. A low valley lies open to pale sun. From rim to rim, a soft green sea sways. No trunks, no branches, just layers of feathery fronds unfurling like hands. The ground underneath is still black with ash, still warm in places when you touch it. But above that wound, a quilt has been laid. Every breeze turns the whole plain into a single animal breathing. This is how a world begins again, with plants that ask for little and give a lot. Ferns step forward when wood is gone, when soils are thin, when light is harsh and rain is sour. They do not wait for perfect, they make enough. Here is the paradox. Devastation becomes a script, and plants write it line by line. The traits that once seemed humble, spores instead of seeds, fronds instead of forests, become advantages in a raw landscape. Ash is not soil, but mixed with water it can be a bed. Light is strong, ferns can handle strong. Nutrients are scarce, ferns grow anyway. The accepted sequence is clear in rocks. Right above the boundary layer, spore counts spike in many places. A fern spike, botanists call it. It tells of landscapes reset to zero and repopulated by pioneers. These pioneers stabilize slopes, trap dust, shade naked ground, and begin the long work of turning mineral into dirt. As they die and fold back into the surface, they thicken the skin of the planet. Other plants follow, mosses, herbs, shrubs. Then later, when cycles are steadier, trees. Alternative angles make the picture more alive. Fungal spores also surge. After the event, feasting on dead wood and helping release nutrients that ferns can then use. Some argue wildfire-adapted plants, with seeds that crack open in heat, joined the first wave in certain regions, making a mosaic. Fern carpets here, fire followers there. In wetlands, horsetails and club mosses may have rushed in, knitting flooded silt into green scaffolding. Each habitat tuned its own choir. The chorus was recovery. Old stories nod toward a green season after sky fire. Peoples describe plains like feathers, hills, in soft armor, and a time when edible fronds saved villages, while trees were still only a rumor. Again, Poetry, not proof, but it rhymes with evidence in stone. Walk out into that valley. The ground is springy underfoot. New shoots curl like question marks, then open into flags. Insects return to graze the soft tissue. With insects come small hunters. Their tracks stitch the mud between plants. Rain falls through the fronds with a softer sound now, each drop broken into a mist that cools the surface. The air smells green. Again. What makes ferns perfect for this hour is not speed alone. It is reach. Spores float. They drift across dead zones and land far from a parent. One frond can seed a hillside. One hillside can teach a valley the word enough. In a decade, the map changes. In a century, the slope is held fast. In 1,000 years, a forest might root here, but only because a fern decided to hold the place open. There is another alliance at work in the dirt. Filaments of fungus thread the roots, trading minerals for sugars, expanding the reach of each plant. Microbes wake and unbox enzymes to chew complicated leftovers into simpler gifts. Earthworms follow, and beetles, and all the little turning screws of soil. The result is not glamorous, but it is decisive. The world gets its pantry back. Stand. Still, and you can feel the tempo. The first flush is wild and even. Then gaps open as different plants test their luck. Shrubs appear. Young trees stick up like periscopes. The fern sea thins to patches between pockets of shade. This is not a loss. It is a handoff. Pioneers are best at first contact. Later they step back. They do not complain. They leave a floor no one else could have built so fast. What secret alliance made recovery possible? It was not one partner. It was a guild, ferns throwing nets of spores, fungi unlocking the pantry, microbes counting carbon, ash granting mineral wealth, rain translating sky to ground, wind delivering messengers, small mouths pruning and spreading. Each alone is a story. Together they are a system. As the valley diversifies, a soft clatter rises at dusk, the sound of tiny hands among fronds. The small hunters from the previous chapter, warmer now, less hungry, begin to climb the first saplings. Their path will soon run through branches. Their eyes will find depth there. Their minds will carry maps of three-dimensional rooms made of leaves. Plants change the room. Animals will change the plot. What grows next from this fern bed? Which leaf becomes a ladder? Which ladder becomes a city? Which city becomes a mind? That can tell this tale. The answer waits in the first birdsong and the first true forest shade, just over the hill, in the green that is learning how to be tall. Dawn spreads in a thin wash of pearl over a quiet plain. The air is clear, almost too clear, a clean bowl with nothing moving inside it. No leather-veined silhouettes drift on thermals. No thunder of flocks rolls from horizon to horizon. Only a pale wind crosses burned trunks and new fern beds, leaving the sky open like a blank page. Lift your gaze and hold it there. The vault above is strangely empty. Where high hunters once rode the heat, great pterosaurs tracing lazy spirals over coasts and rivers, there is only stillness. Even the smaller flyers are scarce, as if the air itself has lost its memory of wings. The world has been edited, and one of its most confident sentences has been removed. Here lies the paradox. Silence overhead becomes a canvas. Absence is not just loss, it is invitation. The quiet is not empty of meaning. It is full of space where new bodies can learn to draw their paths. Textbooks tell a blunt story. The impact and its aftermath crushed large flyers hardest. Food webs broke at their base, and air hunters dependent on open water and fish or on sun-warmed currents found themselves stranded. Big bodies, thin margins, long wings that need room. These were poor bets in ash-dark skies and a colder, choppier climate. The giants went first. The mid-sized followed. What remained were small survivors hugging edges, creatures that could launch from the ground, squeeze through scrub, glean insects from trunks, or glide short distances between stumps. Edge cases complicate the picture in compelling ways. A few bones hint that some pterosaurs persisted a little longer in isolated refuges, coastal pockets or islands where food returned first. Some researchers argue that early bird-like forms that were not quite the birds we know occupied twilight niches. Part climber, part runner, part glider, switching tactics by terrain. There are even proposals that nocturnal or crepuscular flight carried advantages when daytime heat dropped and predators shifted schedules. Sky lanes, once dominated by a few great models, splintered into narrow footpaths used by many small bodies. Listen also to myth, whose wings are made of memory. Stories from river peoples speak of a high silence after a great fire, a time when the sky forgot its shadows. In mountain tales, elders tell of valleys where no hunting birds crossed for years, as if an invisible net hung between peaks. Later verses celebrate the first return. A single dark shape gliding above a harvest field, a tilt of the head, a cry that lands in the chest like rain after drought. Stand at the edge of a lake born from a crater's distant shockwave. The water is young and mineral-rich, a mirror under thin clouds. A line of saplings leans toward ripples. Along the shoreline, insects stitch short, frantic flights over foam. From the reeds, a rustle rises, then stills. Small flyers test the air in cautious arcs, low, brief, ready to vanish if a shadow moves. Each attempt is a rehearsal, and the theater is vast. Why does the sky matter so much? Because air connects everything. A flyer sees the map in a way groundwalkers cannot. A flyer carries seeds farther, spreads pollen wider, moves alarm calls, quickly surveys water clarity from above and finds meals scattered thinly across long distances. When the sky went quiet, whole feedback loops dimmed. Forests lost gardeners, rivers lost scouts. Carcasses took longer to be found and recycled. When wings return, the world accelerates again. The physics of flight does not change, but the economy around it does. In a cooler atmosphere, thermals are weaker. In a younger forest, perches are lower and closer. In a stormier climate, gusts punish large spans. Small bodies with quick launch times, broad diets, and flexible nests win the first auditions. Feathers that insulate, membranes that fold, bones that hollow just enough. These solve practical problems before they look like beauty. From a nearby ridge, watch the air flicker at last. A short glide between charred pillars, a hesitant hover over a fern bed, a sudden drop onto a beetle with a click and a swallow. The theater's lights are flicking on, one dusty bulb at a time. Which winged heirs will rise from this vacancy? The answer is starting in the underbrush and on low branches. Feathers are moving there, soft, ragged, stubborn, finding lift in thin light. Follow them. The next chapter does not resurrect what was lost. It reshapes it. A tangle of brush leans over a blackened log. From inside the green, a small feathered shape slips into view. Head cocked, eye bright, toes tight on the bark. The body is light enough to ride a stem without bending it, heavy enough to make the stem speak. One darting peck lifts a grub, a hop, a scramble, a brief, shaky burst of air under wing, and the creature vanishes again into leaves. This is not the tyrant stride of giants. It is a quiet craft taught by hunger and edges. Here, among ferns and saplings, a new answer to the old riddle of survival takes form. Climb, balance, leap, control the fall, beat the drop, hold the air for a heartbeat longer, then longer still. Flight is not a single invention. It is a long conversation between gravity and hope. The paradox at the heart of this scene carries a shock. Dinosaurs never truly left. They changed their clothes. The lineage that produced many feathered theropods did not go dark with the rest. It bent, shrank, refined, and passed a torch down the corridors of time. To call these creatures birds is to accept a miracle of continuity. Teeth withdrawn, tails trimmed, arms turned to wings, bones lightened and fused, lungs replumbed to trade air with exquisite efficiency. Under the ash, an older story sprouted new feathers. Accepted evidence is rich. Fossils show a gradient from running, feathered, ground-based forms to perching, flapping forms with keels on their breastbones for stronger flight muscles. The timing is tight but plausible. A few avian branches squeeze through the bottleneck and then diversify as forests return and insects bloom. Beaks specialize. Feet choose rails, bark, water, or open ground. Songs appear, first simple, then layered, carrying information and courtship through young woods. Fringe proposals widen the field of view. Some argue that certain heavy-bodied ground-dwelling birds, later cousins to lineages like retites, claimed open habitats first, using speed and height rather than aerial agility to ride out predators. Others suggest that water birds with diets less tied to canopy rebuilds recovered early along coasts, lakes, and rivers. There are even hypotheses about dark flyers, species that leaned into dawn, dusk, or night to avoid harsh daytime climates and fierce competition, evolving. Larger eyes and soft wing beats to own the hours when predators slept. Myth keeps a seat for the feathered. In many traditions, new ages begin with a bird's cry. A first call breaks a long hush. A first shadow crosses a newly green field. A first nest under eaves becomes a household sign that hard seasons have resigned. Songs are not data, but they tell the ear that a loop has closed. Air now carries more than wind. Watch a low branch on the edge of a clearing. A small form lands, twitching tail and head to steady itself on the living perch. The throat flutters. A note leaks out, thin, a thread, but it reaches. Another note replies from deeper shade. The two lines braid. All across the recovering forest, these thin wires of sound begin to knit a net over the ground, claiming space, marking time, saying, here, now, alive. Feathers solve many problems at once. They insulate on cold nights, shed water in sharp rain, and catch the air when a leap goes too far. They display health to mates and warn rivals at a glance. Hollow shafts and branching barbs are engineering marvels writ small, field-tested across storms and summers. No committee wrote them. Selection did by letting what worked stay long enough to have young. Scavenging also plays a role in the early script. Carcasses left by the crisis and its aftershocks feed beaks that can cut, tear, and probe. Shorelines offer stranded fish after rough weather. Floodplains litter the ground with drowned insects once the water falls. Each bounty teaches a behavior. Each behavior lengthens the list of days a small life can make it through. Fragments of a fallen world learn to sing again, not by mourning what was, but by leaning into what is. Low branches, short flights, mixed diets, clever feet, shared alarms, warmth in down, a pair bond that holds through lean spells. Notes gather into phrases, phrases into routines, routines into cultures inherited through the body's memory. How far can this carry? Far enough to redraw dawn itself. Where the sky used to be a silent sheet, it becomes a living instrument. Tones hang between trees like light does, overlapping without canceling, marking territories and seasons with music that shifts in real time with the weather and the day. How did fragments learn to sing again? Hold that question as the camera glides away from tree lines and pans outward over blue water. Beneath that surface, another choir is tuning, a slower, older one. The reefs are starting to glow. A white sand slope falls away under clear shallows. Sun breaks into coins across ripples, then scatters into blue. Farther down, color returns. First a thin haze, then flecks, then unexpected fireworks. Corals waking, algae brushing their stony branches, small fish testing alleys between growing towers. The seafloor, once dim and brown, flickers. This is the paradox of water's memory. From near collapse, the ocean stages a methodical rebirth. No shout, no miracle, only a choreography of tiny steps that becomes a dance. The ledger of recovery runs like this. As the sky cleared and light crept back, phytoplankton resumed their quiet conversion of photons into sugars and oxygen. Nutrient-rich dust settled on the sea and then fell farther, feeding deep bacteria and upwelling loops. Over years then, centuries carbonate-secreting organisms, corals, foraminifera, coccolithophores, rebuilt their factories. Reef frameworks, once dead and silt-covered, hosted new polyps. Grazers arrived, trimming algal overgrowth that would otherwise smother young coral. Predators chased grazers, keeping them honest and mobile. Balance, never perfect, began to oscillate around a livable mean. Sideshows and side doors abound. Some argue that reef refugia existed even at the worst, small pockets with favorable chemistry and currents that protected remnant communities. Others highlight the role of mangroves and seagrass as nurseries, stepping stone habitats linking shattered reefs until larger structures could return. There are also ideas about carbonate saturation states, swinging with volcanic outgassing and weathering on land, setting windows when shells grew easily and windows when they dissolved, forcing timing on the builders below. Legends from islanders speak of stone gardens that went gray and then bright again within a few lifetimes, grandparents describing a time when the water slept, and children later seeing it wake. Fisher songs encode reefs as relatives, aunties that feed, uncles that warn, cousins that play. Metaphor insists on kinship because, for coastal people, the sea is family, giver, taker, teacher. Drift along the edge of a newborn reef. You'll notice the pulse in small cycles. By day, damselfish graze. By night, corals open mouths like flowers in reverse. Shrimp crackle under ledges. Worms filter invisible dinners from passing water. On a moonless midnight, mass spawning turns the sea to low fog, millions of eggs and sperm released in a single synchronized breath. The reef bets on numbers and timing, trusting tides to stir the mixture and carry the next generation to safer places. There's chemistry under every color. Corals partner with microalgae that live inside their tissues, trading shelter for sugar. If water grows too hot or too sour, the partnership strains. The hosts expel their tenants and pale. In recovery eras, temperatures swing less wildly, and pH creeps toward friendlier values. Partnerships rebuild. Entire cities grow from these marriages of animal and plant. Predators guide the shape of the rise. Where sharks and big fish remain, small fish behave differently, moving more, grazing less in any one spot, preventing algae from choking young corals. Remove the top hunters and the lawn goes shaggy. Keep them and the lawn stays clean. Trophic cascades write architecture. On wider scales, currents knit the planet's climate back together. The great conveyors, surface flows powered by wind, and rotation, deep flows driven by temperature and salt, redistribute heat like a global hearth. As these engines restabilize, storms still come, but their patterns are no longer the dice-throw chaos of the immediate aftermath. Regularity, even imperfect, is permission for life to plan. The ocean's breath returns in 3 beats. Photosynthesis building oxygen near the skin, mixing, moving it into depth, and the biosphere using and recycling it. Little by little, oxygen penetrates farther into the dark. Dead zones shrink. Sediments hold less poison and more promise. Shells thicken, colors deepen, sounds multiply. What guided the sea back to balance? Not a single hand, but 1,000 small nudges. Dust from newborn soils, rivers learning their banks, winds finding old roots, larvae riding currents to the right stones, grazers trimming, predators keeping time, chemistry easing from panic to rhythm. Each nudge felt trivial. Together, they were a tide. Hold that pulse in your ears. The hiss of foam, the click of tiny claws, the rumble far below where currents turn corners. Now swivel the view inland. On black plains, a different kind of river is glowing, red and alive. Fire has returned, not as catastrophe, but as craft. Night drapes a field of basalt. Along a crack that runs arrow straight to the horizon, a ribbon of orange wells up and overflows, moving like honey with a temper. The ground trembles in short, regular shivers. The air tastes metallic and sweet, a mix of steam and stone. From a distance, the lava looks slow. Up close it hurries. Here in the hush after crisis, Earth speaks in its oldest voice. It is a hard language. Heat, pressure, melt. But it says something generous. Take this, take this, take this. Fresh rock, new minerals, heat for rain, gases, for air. A curse that doubles back as a blessing. That is the paradox. Fire destroys and prepares in the same breath. It erases, then equips. Geology lays out the ledger. Eruptions pour basaltic lavas across lowlands, burying what was left by firestorms and floods. As these flows cool and crack, water seeps in. Chemical weathering begins, turning glassy surfaces into clays rich in nutrients. Volcanic ash, lofted high, drifts down over vast areas and dissolves faster than old rock, feeding soils with potassium, phosphorus, iron. Sulfur gases react in the air to make sulfate aerosols, which can cool the climate for months to years. At larger scales, repeated pulses can shift temperature patterns, buying time for fragile communities rebounding from heat. Carbon dioxide released by some eruptions warms on longer timescales, buffering against deep freezes. The balance between these pushes and pulls, cooling short, warming long, nudges climates toward moderation. Side channels make the story wider. Lava tubes harden on the surface while still flowing inside, leaving hollow corridors that become safe passageways and, later, cool shelters for bats, invertebrates, and microbes. New hydrothermal fields percolate along faults where magma heats groundwater. There, mineral-laden fluids foster strange ecologies, mats of bacteria that feast on reduced metals and sulfur, communities that live without sunlight, laboratories for chemical evolution. On coasts, fresh lava reaching the sea shatters to black. Sand, sharp, sterile, then suddenly green as algae colonize and tide pools seed with life. Cultural memory recites this dual nature. Farmers who live on young islands know the line. Last year, the mountain burned our fields. This year, the slope grows the sweetest tubers. In tales told by firelight, mountains are both destroyer and giver, deities whose tempers are feared and whose gifts feed children. The contradiction is not resolved, it is honored. Walk the flank of a recent flow at dawn. Heat still bleeds from cracks. Between ropes of pahoho, tiny ferns claim fingertip niches. A spider throws a line from one black ridge to another. Dew beads the thread like beads on a wire. In a skylight of a collapsed tube, a pool steams. Around its rim, yellow and red crusts bloom where minerals precipitate. On those crusts, slimy films pulse, microbial cities painting in colors too. Bright to be accidental. Life is quick to adopt what the planet refuses to hide. Volcanism also writes walls and ladders that guide water. New cones redirect rivers, new dams birth lakes, new cliffs catch clouds and squeeze rain from air. On windward faces, moss spreads in a soft map. On leeward faces, drought experiments with persistence. Diversity grows from these contrasts. Dry. Specialists here, wet devotees there, edge dwellers along every seam. The land becomes a puzzle with more pieces, and more pieces mean more ways for life to solve itself. Of course, the same engines that give can take without warning. A fissure that dozed for centuries can wake in a week. Ash can blot a sky that had just learned to be blue again. Poisonous gases can settle in hollows and turn morning paths into traps. Recovery does not move in straight lines. It zigzags around fresh wounds, learns revised routes, and keeps walking. How, then, does Earth's fury nurse beginnings? By writing time into stone, by breaking crust to resupply the pantry, by stirring air and water with hills and heat, by opening rooms, tubes, caves, hot springs where experiments run day and night, by forcing living things to carry Plan B, Plan C, Plan D in their bodies and cultures. Fire is both exam and teacher. Pass or fail is never final. The test repeats and the lessons stick. Stand back from the lit crack and watch the glow reflected in low clouds. Hear the distant surf sinking to the slow, viscous march of molten rock. Beneath your feet, the planet is not a stage. It is a character with moods and duties. Tonight, its duty is to pour. From lava's edge, the story bends toward green again. Ash weathers, rain falls, soils thicken, seeds take root. The first sprouts are humble, then bolder. Animals arrive, tentative at first, then confident. An empty sky is learning its shadows. A quiet ocean is retuning its choir. A black plane is knitting a garden. What rises next from these gifts? The new roots of wind, the fresh minerals, the warm springs, the lifted hills. The next chapter waits where fire meets leaf, the moment when landscapes stop merely surviving and start composing. Snow falls in slow, heavy sheets over a wide gray sea. At the edge of vision, pale cliffs of frozen water advance with a patient roar, their faces veined blue as if the planet wears giant lungs. Far inland, valleys once green are now drained of color and filled with white silence. On bare slopes, stones grind beneath a moving floor. The sound is deep, granite dust turning to flour under endless weight. Only a little while ago, flames ruled. Ash darkened the air, forests burned like stacked torches, and lakes steamed. Now the same world slips into a long, cold breath. Fires wrote one verse. Frost answers with another. The contradiction is stark and strangely elegant. Heat fed clouds, clouds dimmed light, light fell, and cold seized the script. Where sparks once leapt, crystals now knit. Geology speaks in cycles. After the great strike and its smoky years, sunlight returned unevenly. Dust settled out. Sulfate in the air cooled surfaces faster than oceans, bending winds into new paths. Fresh volcanic fields pumped gases that first shaded, then, over longer spans, warmed. Ocean belts that carry heat stalled, then restarted along slightly altered routes. Polar caps thickened, high latitudes brightened, bouncing more light back to space. One feedback invited another. It did not take a new sun to make this winter. It took a new mirror. Margins contribute their own theories. Some researchers argue that changes in Earth's tilt and the slow wobble of its axis nudged seasons in and out of alignment with continental positions that favored snow to survive summer. Others point to soot lying on early snows, absorbing heat, melting the surface and paradoxically exposing brighter ice beneath that then reflected more light, deepening the chill. There are proposals that ocean salinity shifted. Freshwater pulses from storm-swollen rivers cap the seas in places, weakening overturning currents and letting cold persist. None of these alone commands the stage. Together they behave like a chorus that lowers the lights. Old stories remember the hush. In northern sagas, there is a long dawn, where the sun rose weak and far away, where animals grew thick coats and rivers wore armor. In mountain regions, elders speak of stone rivers, glaciers that moved, slower than patience, yet carved valleys deep enough to swallow a sky. Myth frames cold as a test of listening. Less speed, more watching, more counting of days. Walk along the toe of a glacier. The front hangs like a cliff, dripping steady tears into a gray pool studded with newborn ice. Each calving boom rolls across the valley like a low drum. Underfoot, the ground is littered with rock scabs and powdered silt. A few tough plants cling to boulders polished to a shine. Behind you, farther down valley, braided streams wriggle through black sand. Cloudy with clay, the ice has ground from mountains. The air has no scent but clean water and stone. Cold does not erase life. It edits it. Animals trade endurance for speed. Bodies grow stockier. Noses shorten to save heat. Fur doubles. Fat thickens and becomes a library of calories shelved under skin. Birds learn to migrate along new coasts exposed by low seas. Seals find shelters along ice edges where predators cannot follow. On land, burrows deepen and gather warmth into steady rooms. Even microbes shift diet, chewing iron, sulfur, and trapped gases in subglacial caves, making tiny economies in total night. Ice also builds maps. By pushing stones, it raises ridges that will later guide rivers. By scratching bedrock, it carves long basins that one day hold the bluest lakes. By lowering seas, locking water in frozen vaults, it exposes continental shelves where plants and grazers test new ground. Cold appears cruel, yet it quietly invests. Storing water, shaping roots, laying out future farms and harbors in a blank script no one can read yet. There is strangeness under the sheets as well. In melt tunnels beneath the glacier, black rivers rush through vaulted halls of blue. Heat from the earth and pressure from the ice keep these corridors liquid. There, clear pools hold milky swirl, and on their margins live films of bacteria painting faint colors along walls. A world within a world. Some scientists suspect such places served as refuges for more than microbes, amphipods, worms, crustaceans, small citizens who never see the sun, yet keep food webs humming in secret. When the wind shifts, snow thins enough to reveal the moon. Frost glows. The entire valley looks like a sleeping lung. Expand, contract, each year a slow breath in stone. You listen for a clue. What pulls a planet between burn and freeze? The answer feels like a drumbeat too big for one ear. Tilt and wobble, dust and gas, dark water and bright ice, continents drifting toward or away from the poles, mountains rising to snag clouds. The rhythm is not a switch, it is a wheel. The wheel turns. Far away, twilight stirs among ferns and scrub, where small bodies, not the largest, not the strongest, are rewriting the rules of hunger. Keep the cold in mind, but follow the rustle. New hunters are training in half-light. The sun sinks. A lavender band forms above the horizon. Grass beads with dew. In that soft window when day releases the field and night has not yet claimed it, movement begins. A lean shape slips along a log, head swinging low, tongue testing scents written hours ago. Under a thorn bush, a tan coil unwinds with the slow grace of a thought. On a charred stump, two small eyes shine. The body they belong to weighs less than a handful, yet every nerve is awake. At first glance, none of these hunters looks like a future ruler. They are small, thin-skinned, wary. But weakness, treated correctly, turns into a plan. Thin bodies fit narrow gaps. Soft steps draw no notice. Low needs mean longer chances between meals. Caution stretches life across lean seasons. In a scarred world, patience beats force. Ecology explains the opening. With top tiers of food webs emptied by fire and frost, mid-level spaces widen. Generalist carnivores and omnivores step forward. They do not need specialized prey, they eat what appears. Lizards that wait under cover and strike with a short lunge. Snakes that read heat with pits and hunt in brush freighted with scent. Small mammals that map every stump, every hollow, every beetle trail, and stitch them into routes that look like luck but are built from practice. 1,000 tiny habits become an empire of survival. Margins offer sharper edges. Some skulls from early post-impact layers show rapid growth in hearing chambers, hinting that sound began to matter more than sight. In cooler climates and choppy weather, listening is a better bet than watching. Teeth diversify fast, shears for meat, crushers for snails, hybrids for anything a paw can pin. There is evidence that certain lineages expanded their seasonal toolkits, breeding off-cycle, storing fat in pulses, sleeping deeper when storms strung together. Night work becomes normal. Twilight turns into a classroom. Cultures remember this hour through trickster tales. Foxes, coyotes, mongooses, jackals, figures who win without size. They muddle tracks, test borders, steal right under the noses of bigger brutes, and live to laugh in the next story. Those characters are not fantasy. They are echoes of the first small hunters who taught fear to be a schedule and hunger to be a plan. Watch a scene in detail. A mouse-sized omnivore slides from its burrow, nose up, ears like two satellite dishes. It halts, lifts a seed, rotates it in tiny hands, and eats only the germ, the richest part, leaving the husk for ants that clean the floor. It moves on, then freezes, inner gears listening to a pattern under the leaf litter. Something moves, a grub, a spider. It waits one breath longer than comfort allows, then strikes. A fast bite, a fast chew, and the world is quiet again. Not noble, but effective. This is what power looks like at ground level after kingdoms fall. Across the clearing, a small reptile reads heat along the edge of a stone warmed by the last light. Warmth pools here. Insects gather. The lizard becomes a hinge between stone and shadow. It wastes nothing. a lunge when the heat peak crosses a line, stillness the rest of the time. Nearby, a snake threads the grass with a patience that turns minutes to hours. Its ribs barely lift the dew. Its tongue writes and reads the field's invisible script. When it finally strikes, the movement is so clean it barely earns a sound. As plants recover, vertical space opens. Saplings offer low perches. Low perches offer ambush angles no crawling hunter can predict. Small predatory birds with short wings and strong legs begin to use the new grid. Hop, scan, drop, repeat. Their arrivals force changes below. Where talons patrol, rodents shift to thicker cover or deeper tunnels. Where jaws patrol, birds shift to higher branches. Predator and prey draft each other's shapes. The quiet lesson is that power can hide in slowness. A full sprint burns a day's food. A still hour costs almost nothing. Waiting learns a landscape better than running ever can. When stronger species finally evolve into the open roles again, large cats, wolves, raptors, they inherit a training ground built by these small tutors. Every later strategy borrows a chapter from this Twilight book. Listen more, move less, strike once, vanish. Which hunters of tomorrow are being rehearsed here? The outline is already visible. Flexible jaws, forward-facing eyes, hands that can hold, feet that can grasp, minds that can trial choices in silence before committing the body. The blueprint is not for muscle first. It is for sensing, planning, and timing, and that leads to a deeper shift, one you can hear if you kneel at a burrow mouth when the night is oldest. There is a scratch, then a pause, then a sound that is not claw or tooth. A soft call answered by another. Coordination. Memory shared. A thread between two lives that makes both more likely to see dawn. Follow that thread. It leads to sparks in small skulls. Dirt closes around a narrow chamber lined with roots and dry grass. Warm bodies pressed together, breaths sinking into a slow tide. In the corner, a scrap of stored food, carefully chosen. At the entrance, a plug of leaves blocks drafts and blurs scent trails. Above, wind combs the scrub and stars glaze the cold. Below, something new is happening in old flesh. Eyes adapted to night reflect a faint shine. Ears swivel with eerie precision. Noses test air that to you would smell like nothing. And behind those senses, tiny brains do work they did not need in simpler ages. Ranking sounds by risk, mapping safe paths that change with weather. Planning, small thefts from larger mouths, remembering where seeds were cached, who shared warmth last week, which bark hides the best grubs after rain. Thought begins small. It does not arrive as words. It arrives as saved steps. Catastrophe changed the curriculum. When the world broke, bodies that ran on one or two tactics died first. Bodies that could test, revise, and improvise survived. Selection rewarded flexibility. Neurons that wired faster in youth or continued to wire in adulthood made lives longer. Parental care stretched, turning childhood into a longer class. Play appeared not as luxury but as practice that costs little and pays much. Mock hunts, puzzle chewing with sticks, games of tag that teach pursuit and escape without scars. Evidence hides in subtle measures. Endocasts, the rock molds of ancient skull interiors, show early mammals with bulging olfactory bulbs and expanding neocortical areas relative to body size. Ear bones grew delicate, able to parse faint patterns in leaf rustle and rain. Hands and feet gained fine control. Some species formed groups that were not just mating mobs, but ongoing teams with roles: sentinel, forager, babysitter. These are blueprints for cognition, senses to fill the brain, fingers to act on decisions, and time in safe rooms to learn. Fringe explorations go further. A few researchers speculate that repeated environmental shocks favored neural plasticity itself, genes that keep synapses malleable, that slow the hardening of pathways, allowing adults to relearn when routines fail. Others point to seasonal scarcity as a tutor. Individuals who could switch diets, shift territories, and renegotiate social ties on the fly left more offspring. There are even ideas that nightlife, living under stars where vision fades, tilted the brain toward hearing and smell, senses that work well in darkness and demand fine processing that visual snap judgments never needed. Storytellers translate this rise into animal teachers. In folktales from many lands, there is always a small, bright one who solves what the strong cannot. A raccoon that opens knots, a crow that uses water and stones to lift a seed, a fox that counts steps. These are not childish inventions. They are folk memory of the moment when cunning began to outbid muscle. Watch learning in real time. A young rodent noses a thorny shrub and pulls back, whiskers stung. It approaches again from a different angle, tests a gap, discovers a way to roll the berry free with fewer wounds. The method sticks. Tomorrow, the same body will do it faster. Next week, it will teach a sibling through demonstration and envy, not lecture. What looks like a quirk is an algorithm. Try, fail small, adjust, remember, repeat, or follow a small omnivore across a creek choked with debris. The animal pauses at a freshly fallen branch and tests it. It holds. 2 steps, then a bounce to dislodge a clump of leaves that might hide a snake. The leaves fall. Nothing moves. It crosses. That chain of micro-decisions, probe, test, nudge, verify, defines a mind that treats the world as a series of puzzles instead of a fixed track. Under these behaviors lies time. Brains are expensive. They eat more than muscle, especially in children. For a big brain to pay off, a life must be long enough to use it. That pushes for safer nests, better group defense, and cooperation in raising young. The social world thickens. Signals grow more nuanced. Faces matter. Tones carry stories. The first jokes appear, the harmless trick that trains attention and bonds the group. Laughter is a cheap glue. What does it mean that collapse forged the blueprint of thought? It means that danger paid for attention, scarcity paid for memory, change paid for flexibility, and community paid for care. The mind you carry, able to drift, plan, mourn, hope, was purchased by winters and smoke you never knew. The dead is old and quiet, but it breathes in you. Hold that breath. The ground above these burrows preserves the invoices. Thin layers stained dark, lines of glassy beads, sudden absences of shells, broken sequences of pollen, all the ledgers of loss and return. The rock library is open. Much of it we still can't read. A cliff face rises from a dry riverbed, striped like a stack of sleeping blankets. Some bands are rust red, others ash gray, one paper thin and strange, peppered, with tiny droplets that glitter like stars caught in stone. At the base of the cliff lie fragments, a tooth with fine serrations, a vertebra the size of your fist, a leaf pressed flat as if ironed by time. This is not scenery. It is a shelf in the planet's archive. Rocks keep minutes differently than we do. A flood lays a sheet. A drought leaves a gap. A wildfire spreads a charcoal page. A cold decade sprinkles silt as fine as breath. Then one day, a catastrophe blows glass into the air, scatters it across continents, and the library stamps. A new thin chapter that shows up on every shelf. Below it, many names. Above it, new names, and many blanks where old ones should have continued. The story is written in presence and absence, in dust chemistry and the direction grain edges point. There is a hard truth in this archive. Most lives never make it in. Soft bodies vanish, small bones dissolve, whole forests return to air. What remains is a biased sample. Hard parts, lucky burials, places that escaped erosion. Reading it demands humility. We have a chorus with missing voices, and we're asked to hear the song. Still, patterns shout. Right at the boundary level after the impact, pollen from broadleaf trees collapses while fern spores surge, hinting at stripped landscapes taken over by pioneers. Marine shells thin in some sections, but recover in others where currents carried nutrients back faster. In river deposits, fossils of big reptiles end abruptly. Mammals with generic teeth appear more often. Further up, avian bones diversify, and plants regain complexity. The stairway of return is not even. It dances by region. Proposals crowd the margins of these pages. Some paleontologists point to Lazarus lineages, groups that disappear for long intervals then reappear, as signs of hidden refugees, perhaps mountains, caves, deep lakes, or offshore slopes that did not preserve well. Others read sudden changes in isotope ratios, carbon, oxygen, strontium, as fingerprints of volcanic pulses, ocean mixing events, or vast fires. There are even claims of microdiamonds and quartz scarred by shock that turn ordinary sediment into eyewitness testimony. For a day when the sky broke, myth lives in these layers too. Under desert varnish, panels of rock art show animals no longer roaming that land. Big birds with long wings, antlered giants, fish where there is no water now. The artists did not date their work the way we do, but they recorded presence, and presence argues for climates that turned and turned again. Oral histories tell of years of red rain, summers of ash, hunts on new shores where the sea had gone away. Poetry stands where instruments were not yet built. Even our tools leave questions. 1. Time can blur, layers can be folded and faulted, mixing old with young. 2. Local events can mimic global ones. A small lake can look like a world if that is your only window. 3. Bias hides everywhere. A trap that collects large bones will lie about small ones. So we check, cross-check, and admit uncertainty where the pages are torn. Yet secrets remain locked. What was the exact tempo of darkness after the strike? Months, years, or both in waves? How far did temperatures drop at different latitudes? Which corridors connected island refuges to open continents when seas fell, and which remained closed? Did a cometary swarm deliver more than one blow, spaced over seasons? How much of the die-off belonged to heat and choking air, and how much to starvation afterward? The library hints. It rarely confesses. You can touch the thin iridium-rich line in some cliffs with a fingertip. Above it, life returns in a revised cast list. Below it, a vanished crowd. Between them, the distance of a day and the fatigue of 1,000,000 years of repair. Stand with your hand there and feel how narrow the border is between two worlds. Far along the exposure, the ash-gray band feathers into a paler tone. Within that paler rock, burrow casts, little tubes filled with contrasting sand. Someone lived here under crisis. Worms, insects, tiny vertebrates, turning the ground the way thought turns memory. Survival leaves subtle fossils, not only bodies, but habits. The wind rises in the dry riverbed and moves dust along the lowest shelf, briefly revealing a trackway pressed into ancient mud. 4 toes, then 4 toes again. Hesitations where a head must have lifted to listen. A life once stepped here, unsure, alert, hungry. The mud accepted the story and kept it while empires rose and fell elsewhere. Now it lies in air again, exposed for a few years at most before the sun erases it. What secrets are still locked in stone? Enough to change details we treat as settled. Enough to humble every tidy chart. Enough to remind you that the past is not a museum, but a conversation between rock and reader. Always incomplete, always worth returning to with better eyes. Turn from the cliff. The riverbed ends in a green mouth where young trees stand in rows of light. In their shade, birds rehearse dawn. In their roots, mice puzzle out new routes. Over the hill, ice loosens its grip one finger at a time. Ahead waits a chapter where memory and myth begin to braid with human footsteps. The ground is ready. The voices are warming. The story is far from done. Night settles on a shoreline older than any map. A small fire snaps in a ring of stones. Sparks rise and fade into a sky banded with stars. Elders speak in a voice that carries across water, a voice that remembers what hills forget. The tales are familiar to the young and yet never the same. A sky that burned without clouds, a rain that stung the skin. Rivers that ran backward, the sea climbing the dunes as if it had found its legs. Hands draw in the ash, serpents, boats, mountains, eyes. A hush gathers. Even the waves listen, across oceans and deserts. People who never met tell versions of the same old fear. The day the world turned. The night it did not turn back. The eye, season when daylight was sick and the wind tasted like metal. Some sing of stones that fell from the heavens. Some of a great bird whose wings hid the sun. Some of a bowl overhead flipped and poured. In glacial valleys, Fireside poems remember years of blue hunger when animals wore cloaks of ice and trees cracked open with sound like splitting bones. In islands far south, chants speak of the sea swallowing villages in a single afternoon, then coughing them back as reefs. Different words, the same wound. Could storytelling hold a record when paper did not exist and numbers were not yet the language of time? Memory favors drama, and these tales carry it. Thunder that was not thunder, a sky that hissed, ash that fell like moths. The details vary, but the edges align with scars the earth still wears. Tsunami stones stranded high on slopes, charcoal thick in riverbanks, thin layers of glassy spherules that gleam under microscopes, flood-cut channels that begin nowhere and end everywhere. The ground speaks in strata. People spoke in fireside code. Scholars read cautiously. Oral tradition bends, shortens, grows teeth for a new audience. But across the world, motifs recur with unnerving consistency. A red dawn that lasted too long. Stars hidden for a season. Fish found on high ground. A cold summer when food ran out. Fire in the sky that became fire on the hills, where multiple lines meet. Rock, pollen, ice cores, and story, the outline sharpens. A comet broke, the air changed, the sea climbed, the people moved. Dates drift. The rhythm stays, others carry the thought further. Some propose that families of stories preserve echoes of much older shocks. Not just storms and volcanoes the tellers witnessed, but whispers of deeper ages, passed hand to ear so long that only the shape remains. The idea sounds wild. Then you hold a shard from a layer rich in iridium and listen to a grandmother describe a sun that fell sick and a winter of ash. Not proof. A rhyme across epochs. The point is not to turn songs into spreadsheets. It is to notice that human memory invests in the same events the earth records most clearly. Sudden changes in light, sudden changes in water, sudden changes in where food and safety live. When the planet jerks the wheel, people build a story big enough to steer the next time. Two words appear again and again in these tales. Carry and warn. Carry the lesson. Warn the next ones. On this beach, the elder's voice softens. He tells of a family who tied their boats to a great tree when the sea pulled away and the fish beds rose shining in the sun. They did not chase the gift. They waited. When the water returned as a wall, their knots held. The boats bucked like live animals, but they did not break. In the morning, the village was gone and the boats were still there. The listeners passed the lesson between glances. The moral is not thunder, it is rope. Stories also keep a moral map of where to live. Do not sleep in the mouth of the valley where the river will run. Do not build on the black plain where a mountain once poured stone. It will pour again. Do not trust a mile of water between you and the open sea. Water remembers its path better than men do. Such lines may sound like old fears until a satellite tracks an ash column from a volcano to a city or a wave that leaves the trench and climbs a shore you thought safe. Could memory survive loss through story alone? On this coast, every child nods in the glow and already knows the refrain. When the sea runs away, run the other way. When the sky rains fire, do not count the sparks. When the birds fall silent, do not wait to ask why. The tale ends with an unanswered line. The old ones always do. Who first tied the rope? The fire pops, and a new log answers with sparks. The question stays. If tales are fossils of human memory, what layers do we still fail to read? There are marks high in the hills that no one has named, glyphs half lost to salt and sun, knots in the grain of story that no one has pulled through. As embers collapse and the waves recover their whisper, the night leans closer, as if inviting another teller to try again. The shore darkens. Far inland, forests are regrowing on the bones of a burned world. Under their shade, small bodies carry seeds and young crossing ridges their ancestors would have feared. The next turn in the tale belongs to them. Dawn slides through thin mist and lands on leaves still wet from the night. Where a year ago there was ash, there is now a weave of green, ferns layered under shrubs, young trees shoulder to shoulder, vines stitching the gaps. Threads of sunlight play across the maze, and in those threads small shapes move. Careful, quick, quiet. A creature the size of a hand runs a branch and stops to test the air. Another, barrel-bodied and low, noses through leaf litter, flipping it like pages. From a hollow, a mother emerges with young, clinging belly side, each heartbeat stamped into her fur. They do not roar. They check, decide, commit, and vanish. Step by step, valley by valley, this is how the losers of the last age become the founders of the next. The thrones left empty by giants will never be filled in the same way. Instead, the country divides into many small offices, everyone occupied. Generalists take the lead, eaters of seeds and bugs and eggs and whatever else the day yields. Climbers explore new floors above the ground. Diggers invent cities under roots. Swimmers learn the soft language of floodplains. The world that once felt owned by a few enormous forms becomes a marketplace of strategies. Why do small, fragile bodies win? Because fragility is not just weakness. It is also low cost. A little animal needs less, breeds sooner, and learns faster. It can gamble on 10 roots and survive if only one pays off. The aftermath of crisis is not a place for glory. It is a place for options. The slim ledger of a tiny life can balance when the large ledger fails. Evidence shows the spread like slow fire. In the layers above the global ash, tooth shapes diversify fast. Nippers for fruit, grinders for tough plants, shears for meat, and mixed sets that can handle all three. Limb bones drift toward climbing in some lines, sockets that allow rolling, swings, wrists that lock just enough, ankles that flex without breaking. In others, spines shorten and ribs broaden to suit a digging life. Claws become spades and levers. Where water braids rivers into meadows, body plans swell into sleek torpedoes with strong tails and stiff backs. New maps open, forest canopy, burrow labyrinth, marsh lane, and bodies meet them with matching blueprints. Stranger ideas lurk at the edges and sometimes fit. Some researchers see signs that certain small mammals toggled their metabolism seasonally, borrowing tricks now seen in torpor and hibernation. Others note ear structures that would let these animals hear low frequencies through ground and wood, turning roots and logs into telegraphs for danger and dinner. There are even suggestions of opportunistic partnerships, mammals spreading fungi in their tunnels, fungi returning the favor by freeing nutrients around roots that feed the plants that feed the mammals. Humans carry dim echoes of this hour in stories about clever pests who outlast kings, mice that steal from granaries guarded by idols, raccoons that open latches the maker swore were raccoon-proof, small dogs that turn boars that outweigh them. It is not flattery. It is the record of appetites recalibrated to fit changing rooms. Walk a ridge and look across young forest. The canopy is low, patchy, eager. In the gaps, berries shine. In the shade, mushrooms bloom like moons. Everywhere, there is food small enough to hold. Energy packets placed a few steps apart, enough to keep a body going if that body keeps going. Networks form, seed dispersal routes, scent highways, repeated loops passed from mother to child like songs. Even the predators are learning to match. Sharp eyes for twitching leaves, soft steps that turn sound into a rumor, a strike that spends 1 coin of energy and earns 10. As the centuries pass, these little expansions aggregate into continental change. Range maps thicken, rivers carry stowaways to new basins. Land bridges open as seas fall during cold pulses, then close as seas rise during warm ones, mixing and sorting the cast each time. Some lines fade, others flourish. A few step into roles that look daring, nighttime gliders, burrow architects, root farmers that seed underground gardens with tubers for later harvest. Every success writes another line in the rulebook: diversify, disperse, downsize costs, upgrade senses. Why did vulnerability become a winning trait? Because a world that keeps shifting punishes the heavy and rewards the nimble. The more a life can compress needs into a small box, the easier it is to carry that box across a broken bridge. The first mammalian bloom is not a parade of heroes. It is a crowd of survivors with good habits. The morning lifts to midday. In the branches, Something new is practicing balance with hands more than claws. The forest is teaching a talent that will eventually stare back at the forest and name it. Follow those hands. The past has not entirely let go. The old rulers still throw shadows from ponds and shorelines. Before we climb, meet the ones who never left. A river widens into a green-brown lagoon. The surface moves as little as a held breath. Near the bank, 2 yellow stones turn out to be eyes. The rest of the body is the color of silt and patience. A dragon's smile shows a row of conical teeth, built for holding, not chewing. Farther out, a smooth dome surfaces, takes air with a soft pop, and sinks, a turtle carrying a room on its back. Beyond the channel where the water runs blue, a shadow slips past with barely a ripple. If you could look down, you would see a shape honed into a weapon by time, a shark that has never believed in retirement. These are not souvenirs. They are the unfinished thoughts of an age that did not completely die. Some children of the dinosaur world never paid the debts the sky demanded of others. They outlast. They make a living in ways that ignore fashion. Why do they endure? Because their contracts with the planet are simple and efficient. A crocodile asks water for stealth, sun for warmth, rivers for things that come too close. It waits. A turtle invests in armor and time. It eats slow food and turns years into a strategy. A shark rides a highway of pressure and scent older than continents. It wastes no movement and confuses the future with the past because the same rules keep paying. On land, extinction shattered complex food webs and toppled specialists. In the water and swamps, certain designs remained sound. Ambush from below, drift long between meals, turn waste heat into a non-problem by using the sun or the sea. When the world went dark and cold, these methods did not collapse. They adjusted. Less to eat? Slow down. Temperature dips? Move depth and latitude. New species appear? Test them one at a time with your mouth. The evidence is in calendars written on bones. Growth rings tell of long lives punctuated by feast and famine, and the bodies did not panic. Tooth chemistry records migrations in repeating loops like lullabies. Shells and scales show repair scars over decades. These are not athletes. They are monks who mastered fasting. Ideas on the edge add color. Some researchers note that lineages with simple goals and broad tolerances, urothermal, urihaline, sailed through climate shoves that sank narrower boats. Others point to refuge habitats that change slowly: deep lakes, offshore shelves, mangrove tangles, salt marshes, places where storms pass overhead and leave the room intact. There is also a case that top aquatic hunters stabilized young food webs by pruning the overbold and leaving space for balance below, a brutal mercy that kept cycles from flying apart. Old stories keep these shapes close. River gods with armored backs, lake spirits with eyes just above the surface, sea lords whose fins cut water like knives through cloth. Human fear made them big. Time made them steady. In shrines and tattoos, the same silhouettes recur: the crescent tail, the jagged jaw, the ridged shell. Our ancestors recorded respect in ink and prayer long before labs measured growth rates. Stand at the bank and track the stones with your eyes. A fish comes too near the reed line. The water folds inward and erupts, then flattening ripples, and a feather of red. No chase. A step, a clamp, a lean back into quiet. In deeper water, a school splits around a moving wall that never changes speed. Open ocean or estuary, the rhythm is one beat. Find, take, keep moving. What code do these elders carry? Longevity as shield, patience as muscle, minimalism as wealth. Use places that remain during chaos. Keep your list of needs short and your list of habitats long. Let your body practice the same solution for 1,000,000 years rather than invent 10,000 new ones. In a world gone experimental, the conservative wins more often than we admit, but their shadow holds a lesson for the newcomers. If a shark's map is old, it still meets new energies. If a crocodile's river shrinks, its ledger breaks. Invincibility is a story our fear tells us. The rock record tells us even these designs bent under earlier crises. They survived because The planet allowed their habits to continue, not because they were magic. The lagoon glosses back to stillness. In the canopy behind you, a soft commotion rises. Leaves, a leap, a branch bending, a quiet landing. While the old designs hold their lanes, a new one is testing ways to think with hands. The next section begins where light filters through leaves. Like green water, and bodies learn to steer the third dimension. Morning pours through a young forest as if the sun had been sieved. Leaves glow from within. Trunks stand like columns in a hall. Lianas hang in loose ropes between pillars. A small face peers from the shadow at the end of a branch. The eyes face forward. The hands wrap the round wood with a confidence no claw can match. Toes mirror the hands. Tail, if there is one, acts like a line held by a friend. The body leans, tests the give, crosses. Here, high above the ground but not far from it, a different plan takes shape. Solve height with grasping. Solve distance with leaps. Solve survival with social glue. These are not the biggest or the fastest. Their triumph is not one trick. It is a set of small gifts, braided until the braid holds. Why here and now? Because the world honestly invited it. After fire and frost, forests returned in mosaics, patches of canopy, ladders of branches, islands of fruit and flowers suspended in air. In that map, an animal that could hold, pull, judge depth, and remember paths would find food no hoof could reach. Eyes that look forward gather two images and turn them into one with distance built in. Hands without claws hurt less when they miss and allow fine work when they hit. Nails protect without snagging. Soft pads whisper to bark. The body becomes a quiet instrument tuned to wood. Evidence shows the steps. Early forms carry teeth ready for mixed diets. Fruit, leaves, insects, eggs. Skulls widen across the temples, making room for sight and smell to talk to one another. The bony ring around the eye strengthens, bracing the camera for a life where falls are fatal. Ankles and wrists gain ranges of motion that let branches be pathways instead of obstacles. Most telling, the newborns come undercooked and stay close. Childhood lengthens. Learning fills the added minutes. Ideas on the margins help stitch the scene. Some lines may have started as nocturnal climbers and then moved into daylight as forests. Recovered and raptors took time to return in numbers. Others suggest that fruiting schedules pulled groups across territory in circuits that trained memory and teamwork. One tree today, that stream pool tomorrow, the ridge figs next week. There are even proposals that poisonous insects and thorny plants nudged intelligence by punishing bad choices sharply, rewarding the ones who remembered the safe colors and the safer angles. Community becomes not just pleasant but required. A lone climber falls more often. A pair can pass a young one between bodies when a gap widens. A small troop can defend a grove from rivals and share what another found. Voices multiply. Alarm calls for snakes, hawks, cats. Contact calls for keeping the line together in the understory fog. Soft coos for comfort during long rains. Sharp barks during disputes that stop short of blood. Faces begin to read faces. Grooming grows into a currency. Trust buys time to teach. Watch a morning route. The troop leaves a sleeping tree in single file, the smallest in the middle. A sentinel pauses on a high seat and scans the sky and the ground. Below, a youngster tests a jump too wide. An older sibling reaches back and offers a wrist. The leap becomes a climb. At a fig laden with fruit, the adults sort quickly. Ripe to mouth, half ripe to cache, overripe to ground for insects later. Knowledge walks the branch and ends in bodies. Brains grow, but not as decorations. They are maps and schedules. 1. Mind remembers a leopard's path and recommends another. Another mind knows a way around a thorn fortress to the soft heart of a flower stand. Another holds the season's rhythm. When the river falls, where the crabs hide, how long to wait? After a storm before the caterpillars appear in curtains. These are not stories as words yet. They are stories as roots and timings. What did the fall of dinosaurs have to do with this ascent? Everything and nothing. No tyrant foot shakes the woods now. No sky hunter casts a shadow that blots out the sun. In the space left by lost giants, trees filled the air. In the space filled by trees, hands learned their work. It is not an arrow from them to us. It is a clearing where a new dance could begin. The catastrophe did not write your name. It set the stage where names could be written at all. As generations pass, some primate lines go wider and heavier and return to ground. Others go smaller and lighter and stay aloft. A few become runners of open country with faces that can sweat and eyes that scan horizons instead of canopies. Languages will one day rise from these throats. Tools will one day sit in these hands. Fire will one day be encouraged instead of feared. None of that is here yet. Morning ends with grooming and a nap, not philosophy. But the notebook is open. The first entries are legible. How did the collapse throw open a door for us? By removing a ceiling, by raising ladders, by forcing minds to carry more of the load than muscles once did. The trees gave courses. The seasons gave exams. Groups graded one another with gentle touches and rough jokes. In that classroom, a species learned to plan tomorrow instead of only surviving tonight. Hold that dawn in your chest. Down the slope, rock faces keep documents the forest cannot read. Thin lines of old ash, lake beds stacked like pages, shells that mark the tide where no tide runs now. Ahead lies a chapter where memory, science, and story braid tighter, and the voice telling the tale will start to sound like ours. A copper sky hangs over a plain of brittle grass. Wind rises out of nowhere and turns the horizon into a wall of moving sand. Grains hiss along the surface, like a flock of tiny animals, biting skin, grinding leaf to powder, polishing stone. Days later, the same ground drowns under a brown river that did not exist yesterday. The current carries whole trees as if they weigh nothing, then slips away, leaving a map of tangled roots and stranded fish. Weeks pass, and heat arrives like a new law, bending air on the far hills, making birds pant with open beaks. The planet keeps changing costumes without warning. Here is the lesson the land repeats. Survival is not steady, it is flexible. The world does not hold one mood long. Dust gives way to flood, flood to drought, drought to a run of warm seasons that feel like a promise and end like a trick. Creatures that treat weather as a partner fail. Creatures that treat weather as a puzzle endure. Accepted research offers a set of gears behind the drama. Volcanic. Plumes seed skies with sulfate haze that cools the surface for months to years. Then carbon dioxide from those same eruptions warms the century that follows. Ocean loops, great rivers of salt and heat, stutter and restart, shifting storm tracks. Like sliding doors. El Niño-style swings toy with rainfall, making some coasts lush and others harsh, then reversing the roles. Land itself amplifies change. When forests burn or retreat, bare ground reflects more sun, winds strengthen, clouds move, and the next season inherits the new pattern. Fringe proposals add unsettling notes. Some geologists suspect that comet dust, passing through the inner solar system, may have dimmed sunlight in subtle ways over stretches of time, adding a faint, repeating beat to climate music. Others wonder whether solar cycles, changes in our star's magnetic temper, nudged cloud formation and through clouds, temperatures, in rhythms longer than human memory. A few even argue that mass burps of methane from frozen seafloor shelves occasionally rewrote weather in a handful of years, a nightmare valve opening under dark water. Old stories preserve the aftermath, not the math. In deserts, elders talk of the year the wind ate the farm. In river countries, grandmothers remember summers when the fish came to the doorsteps, and winters when cows walked a frozen estuary. In the hills, men with long memories describe a hot decade that ended in a spring of hailstones like fists. The names differ. The shoulders shrug the same way. This is how the world teaches composure. Walk a ridge after the flood subsides. Mudflakes curl on fallen leaves, drying at the edges. A trail of small prints leads from one puddle to a patch of sedge where crickets chirp as if the disaster never happened. Over there, an old burrow has collapsed. A new one mouths the bank a few feet higher. The builder learned elevation the way a child learns words, by trying until it sticks. Nearby, a plant that hates wet tries again on a hummock, while one that loves wet sends runners into the new channel, knowing the map will change again soon. For animals, the toolkit grows. Seeds get cached not in one pantry, but in 10. Mates spread across microhabitats instead of clustering in the same grove. Births shift by weeks to dodge a season of storms, then shift again when the storms move. Some species carry 2 diets in their bodies, wet menu, dry menu, and switch with the month. Others learn to migrate shorter distances, trading a grand tour for a zigzag that follows green up week by week across a mosaic of hills. You can smell the shift in a dust storm, the scent of broken stems and hot stone, and then, in the first rain after months of nothing, the spice of soil waking up. Life listens for those cues. Seeds break dormancy when temperature and moisture rhyme. Insects time their hatching to match the first flush of leaves. Birds pull off a second brood if the river does not fail. Predator and prey meet by appointment, more often than by luck in a world where the calendar itself misbehaves. What hidden laws drive all this? Orbital tilt and wobble, the oval of Earth's path around the sun growing rounder or longer. Continents drifting into positions that either catch ice or repel it. Mountain ranges lifting to grab clouds. Sea gates opening and closing. The sun's own heartbeat rising and falling in cycles we feel but do not control. Add volcanoes and the odd rock from space, and the score becomes too complex for a single flute to play. Yet the melody is clear enough for evolution to learn. Do not marry one weather. Keep your vows to many. The storm wall thins. Sun pours through like coins spilled across a table. The plain looks new and old at once, fresh scars on antique bones. Far to the north, night glows on white cliffs where rivers of frozen water carve their signatures into the bedrock, slow as law, sure as gravity. The drumbeat of cold is starting again. Step closer to the blue. Moonlight pours down a valley lined with rock that bears long, parallel scratches. A white river fills the floor, from wall to wall, moving so slowly that only the ear knows it travels. A constant, distant grind. A low thunder where the front calves into a lake and icebergs spin under starlight. On the slopes, boulders rest in places no flood could have tossed them. In the air, there is no scent, but clean cold, and a whisper of crushed stone. The same force that starves a land also sculpts it. Frozen water punishes hills and hollows, yet leaves beauty behind. Fjords that look like ink poured between mountains, U-shaped valleys where herds will graze one day, kettle lakes bright as coins in a carpet of green. Moraines that curve like giant fingerprints across meadows. Death carves. Life later admires the lines. Earth science sets the metronome. When summers at high latitudes lose just enough heat, winter's snow lingers. Bright surfaces reflect more sunlight. Next winter's snow accumulates on last winter's remains. Ice thickens, flows, and begins to act like a slow river. Sea levels fall as water locks into caps and sheets. Winds grow stronger crossing bare plains. Dust increases, cooling the planet a little more by shading the air and feeding iron to the ocean, which stokes plankton growth and pulls carbon from the sky. Feedbacks link arms and push together. Researchers add other levers. Tectonic lifts raise mountain ranges to catch clouds and build permanent snowfields. Straits open or close, and redirect warm currents away from the poles. Greenhouse gases rise or fall, shading or swelling the next century's heat. The system can snap between settings, a mild world with small caps, or a stern one with moving walls of ice. The trigger might be subtle, a shift in Earth's orbital timing that changes how summers align with distance from the sun, yet the outcome looks absolute from a valley caught below the glacier's gaze. Myth keeps a simpler ledger. Years of white breath, years when wolves walked rivers, years when the sky felt far away. In a few northern songs, the ice is a person, old, stubborn, exacting, who arrives without a word and leaves without an apology, but pays for the stay by reshaping the guest room. People later thank the Old One for the fish-rich lakes and the rich soils left behind, even if they curse the cold while it lasts. Walk the margin where white meets black rock. Beneath your boots, stones crunch like sugar under glass. Meltwater. Channels loop and braid, carrying gray milk full of ground mountain. The stream looks dirty, yet it is the start of fertility far downstream. When the sheet retreats, it will leave behind a pantry's worth of minerals. Grasses will come, then shrubs, then trees. In a human age, farmers will praise the depth of those black soils without ever hearing the glacier's long sermon. Life does not quit in the shadow of ice. It moves. Caribou and their ancestors walk seasonal circuits, calves born on windswept ridges where insects fail. Arctic foxes press their bellies into snow tunnels and carry summer in their fur. Plants, miniaturize, hugging ground, keeping leaves small and waxed, tucking buds under old growth for warmth. Birds migrate along thin coasts that ice cannot reach, stitching continents with flight. In the sea, rich edges bloom where cold meets warmth. Whales write roots that will be used for thousands of years. Under the sheet itself, there is a hidden country. Heat from the earth and pressure from the ice keep a film of water running along the bed. Channels open and close, rerouting rivers in a single season. Caverns form where roofs of blue arch over black flow. Bacteria live here, turning iron and sulfur into food, building mats that look like velvet in alien light. The cold world owns a beating heart. How does ice create while it kills? By grinding high country into fine meal that feeds future fields. By damming valleys until they become lakes. By dropping erratic stones that seed moss gardens. By forcing life into refuge zones where it evolves new tricks, then releasing it back across the land when the grip loosens. The sculptor's chisel strikes hard. The sculpture outlasts the pain. Dawn finds the glacier blushing pink where the first sun licks its face. Thin clouds tear on the peaks. A raven crosses the valley in unhurried strokes, heading for a larch that refuses to give up its cones. Far below, beyond the last moraine, a plain unfurls toward a dry riverbed, scattered with the marks of those who lived here before and after the ice. Teeth, tracks, shells pressed into old mud. Those marks carry lessons that outlive the bodies that made them. Follow them into the library of dust. A slab of riverbank slumps after a storm, exposing a dark page stitched with pale shapes. Here is a jaw lined with tiny, even teeth. There, a splay of toes frozen mid-step as if the animal had paused to listen, then changed its mind and never got the chance to lift its foot again. Nearby lies a leaf so thin you can see the veins. The surface smells like wet clay and old secrets. Stone plays fair and unfair at once. It keeps what luck delivers to it. Hard parts more often than soft, floods more often than breezes, deaths in low places more than lives on hills. Giants should be overrepresented. They leave big bones, after all, but the record says something else. Small things write more often. Not because they matter more, but because they are many, and because they live and die where mud collects. And because they sometimes shelter in caves and burrows that later turn to rock with their stories inside. Lay a fingertip on a tooth the size of a grain of rice. Its edges are sharp and meet in a way that tells of a diet: seed breaker, beetle cutter, leaf nipper. The tooth says the owner knew lean seasons and feasts. It says the owner's body carried options in its mouth. That little history reads louder in stone than the shattered femur of a giant that needed perfect weather and a full pantry to last a month. Fragility leaves more messages, not because it is noble, but because it tries more options and loses more tokens. The board records the tokens where they fell. Accepted research uses these scraps like letters to spell a language of survival. Trackways show herds changing direction at floodlines and single animals avoiding slick mud by stepping on exposed roots. Where patterns on teeth record seasonality, hard food in late dry months, soft in green ones, whispering of the ability to switch. Menus. Thin growth rings tell of drought years endured, wide rings of lucky runs. Burrow casts reveal neighborhoods, chambers for young, side tunnels for waste, corridors angled to catch certain winds. The ground keeps the blueprints. Out on the edges, ideas grow bolder. A few scientists read community-level patterns as signals of cooperation. Clustered nests and shared entrances among small mammals during cold spells, for instance, or repeated overlaps in predator and prey tracks that look like game trails with rules, not chaos. Others argue that some fossil pollen assemblages hint at deliberate plant tending by animals, disturbed patches with the same edible species returning year after year within the range of likely den sites. These claims are young. The stone is old, the dialogue continues. Folklore adds a different kind of evidence. People bring a child to a cliff where shells stud the rock high above any tide. The sea lived here, the elder says, and the child nods and moves the camp inland a little without arguing. Hunters place a hand in a petroglyph shaped like a hoof and speak to a ghost herd. A traveler sleeps in a cave marked with paws, the size of dinner plates and knows to light 2 fires, not 1. The rock speaks, and those who listen do better. Walk further along the cut bank. A ripple pattern crosses the layer like corduroy, arrested mid-wave, the ghost of a shallow current from a day no one saw. On top of that pattern sit 3 footprints, left, right, left, leading into a fade where the next layer swallowed the trail. The stride is short. The toes splay a little more on the right than the left. Perhaps the animal carried something. Perhaps it limped. Either way, the message is less about the walker and more about the path. A route ran here that felt safe enough to try again. Multiply that by centuries, and you have a migration. Fragile creatures leave eternal marks because they make so many, and because they use the margins where mud is a pen. Giants fade, not only because their bones scatter and break, but because their lives depended on arrangements less likely to fossilize. Endless food, stable water, wide lanes. Small lives write in clay every day. Large lives write in clay only, when the world already intends to erase them. What does that say about survival? That success looks like repetition. That safety looks like many chances. That memory inscribed in habit carries further than memory tied to one place. The best textbooks for living are not skulls. They are footprints. Sun breaks through the cloud and paints the river in ribbons. Far beyond the bend, a line of cliffs guards a broad basin pocked with old lake beds and ash rims. In those layers, endings stack like chapters, not one, but many, not final, but frequent. The last section turns those pages faster, showing how the same song returns in new keys. A slow montage fills the screen like a heartbeat. Forests glow and dim. Reefs bloom and bleach and bloom again. Plains carry herds until dust takes the grass, then carry wind until rain remembers the schedule. The frame widens, trilobites parade and vanish. Coral empires rise, crash, and return under different architects. Conifers give way to flowering trees. Lizards become rulers, then memories. Small, warm bodies edit the script in the margins until their handwriting fills the page. Over it all, the planet turns with the calm of a clock that never asked for our approval. One event did not shape the Earth. Many did. The end of the dinosaurs was spectacular, but it was one bell in a carillon, the great dying before it, when most marine life blinked out. The oxygen surges and crashes long before animals. The ice that reached the equator in deep time. The greenhouses that turned poles into swamps. Every end trained the next beginning. Every beginning carried seeds of its own tests. Accepted research lays out a rhythm. Catastrophes prune and simplify. Diversity plunges. Then lineages radiate into the space left behind, exploring forms and strategies the old crowd never tried. Stabilization follows. Ecosystems knit into complex webs until pressure builds again from below. Volcanoes. Above. Rocks from space. Within, evolutionary arms races that ratchet cost, or afar, orbital nudges that drag climate. The cycle is cruel and creative at once. Subtract, then multiply. Ideas at the edge ask whether the cycles themselves have long beats. Some geologists note rough clustering of big die-offs around certain spans, perhaps linked to mantle plumes, welling up from deep within the planet on schedules measured in tens of millions of years. Others hypothesize that the solar system's wander through the galaxy's crowded arms stirs comet tanks now and then, raising the odds of a bad shoot the moon. There are even whispers of cosmic rays altering cloud cover on geologic time, though the mechanism remains hard to nail down. The point is not certainty, it is the possibility that the drum has more than one drummer. Myth, true to form, turns the repetition into teaching. Floods and fires and long winters recur in story cycles as moral tests. Share, move, listen, gather, let go. The hero who refuses to learn drowns or burns. The village that remembers the rope survives the second wave. The wanderers who read the sky find grass when the old valley turns to salt. Storytellers keep time by putting the same trouble in new clothes until the lesson becomes a habit. The camera slows over one extinction. You could smell if you were there. Forests blanketed in ash, rivers running like tea, the horizon dim. Then, season by season, green returns. Ferns like lace, shrubs, saplings, shade, songs. The next cut shows reefs, first as rubble, later as gardens where new tenants hang bright flags. Another cut, a plain stamped with tracks from many feet where once only a few giant shapes roamed. The view pulls back and you see the pattern shape a larger truth. The planet is not fragile the way a glass is fragile. It is fragile the way a forest is fragile. Able to burn, able to regrow, never the same twice. For living things, the curriculum across cycles stays constant. Spread risk, keep costs low, store energy, cooperate where it pays, compete where you see you must, learn fast, move when the ground tells you to, and teach your young the shortcuts. The graduates of this school are not the most dramatic forms. They are the most adaptable. They leave marks in mud and in memory. Is extinction an end or a rhythm? The answer depends on where you stand in the measure. For the last member of a lineage, it is a door closing. For the system, it is a clearing where the next forest rises. Both truths fit in the same frame. Mourning and awe can share a bench. Dusk gathers as this chapter fades. A line of cranes crosses the orange sky, legs trailing like reeds. Down in the reeds themselves, a mammal the size of your hand noses a seed into a safe fold of earth before the first frost. On a reef not far offshore, corals release pale smoke that is not smoke at all but hope. Millions of eggs drifting in. Moonlight. Far inland, a glacier's edge creaks as it surrenders another block to the lake, feeding the river that feeds the valley, that feeds the village that keeps the rope ready. The reel slows on a single thought. Endings arrive. Beginnings. Answer. The cadence continues whether we speak it or not. What we can do is learn to hear it earlier, read the ground more carefully, and teach the next storytellers where the high watermarks lie. Hold that thought as the camera turns toward the final stretch of this saga. Memory will soon meet warning. Story will shake hands with evidence, and the echoes of ancient cycles will step into the noise of the present. The drum keeps time. Are we listening? A cold lantern beam brushes a cavern wall, and the rock answers with animals that no longer walk our world. Lions without manes stare from ochre shadows. Mammoths step with quiet weight through a frozen meadow that exists only in pigment. A rhinoceros, with sweeping horns, lowers its head as if ready to charge across the limestone. Your breath fogs in the cool air. Fire smoke once lived here. Songs once echoed here. The walls still keep both. Hold this scene in your mind. People deep underground, far from sun and storm, drawing beasts with a surgeon's care. They choose a curve in the rock that already suggests a shoulder. They place a charcoal line where a tendon should pull. They add motion with a blur of repeated legs. The cave is not only a gallery, it is a memory device. These hands record a world outside that shifts too quickly to trust. Here is the strange thought that lingers. The artists painted creatures that their children might never have met. Some images match fauna fading from local valleys. Some show herds on plains their clan left generations earlier. Yet the details feel right. Ear shapes, muscle folds, the way a tail hangs between steps. How did they know so much about what was disappearing? Most researchers offer a simple answer with deep roots. Memory is communal. Hunters teach younger hunters with images, as tutors do with chalk. Stories carry across migrations. A clan that once followed mammoths into wind-scoured basins keeps the knowledge alive inside limestone halls, long after the paths have closed. Art becomes a freezer for skill. When a prey returns during a cold snap, the method is not lost. There are other lanes of thought. Some archaeologists point out that certain panels look like layered time, older outlines repainted by later hands, combining scenes from different ages into one living wall. The result feels like a dream where years overlap. Others note the presence of animals never common in the immediate region. Perhaps these came from traders' tales, or from travelers who brought antlers and hides as gifts. The wall becomes a map of places as well as days. Then there are braver suggestions. A few thinkers wonder if symbolic memory can leap farther than we suppose, if people crafted shared images of a deeper past carried in fragments, the way rivers carry sand from mountains no one alive has seen. Some even speak of inherited motifs, shapes that return across cultures not because anyone remembers a specific event, but because our nervous systems rhyme with certain forms, curves of power, eyes in the dark, the arch of a horned head setting, every spine on alert. In that reading, the wall keeps both history and biology, real hunts, real winters, and deep animal signals coded into us. Myth steps in with its own paints. In many traditions, caves are lungs or wombs of the land. People enter to meet ancestors, to talk with the underworld, to learn from teachers who come as animals. A bison on stone is not only a bison, it is a door to counsel. When the outside world flickers, glaciers advancing, forests shifting, these doors matter even more. They promise a stable meeting place for knowledge when rivers move their beds. Light, your torch in this scene. Soot clings to the ceiling, a thin black snow left by generations of fires. A palm print flares on the wall beside the beasts. Someone blew red pigment around a hand and left a negative ghost. It looks like a sign that says, "I was here," but it also reads as a pledge. We keep this. We pass it on. What did those people believe about the animals they drew? Some panels show spears, others show only grace and movement. Perhaps the act of painting fed a hunt's success. Perhaps it was gratitude after meat. Perhaps it was both. In lean years, the walls might have been a substitute field where the old plenty still ran. If you close your eyes, you can hear water drip. You can hear air hum in narrow passages where the rock thins toward the surface. The world outside is loud with weather and hunger. Inside, careful lines break silence with motion you can see but not touch. A lesson arrives at a human pace, and it stays. Were these drawings history or a longer inheritance? The question does not settle. The caves return your whisper with a soft echo, as if the stone itself cannot choose. The flame gutters. The beam drops. Footsteps move toward the entrance where day waits, and with day comes a newer fire that will write its own lessons across bone and mind. What comes next? People step from caves to campsites, from campsites to coasts, from coasts to open country. Firelight follows, and in that glow, our kind begins to look like itself. Fire breath slides along a cave ceiling, and shadows begin their slow dance, a hand feeding a flame, a face underlined by light, a circle of eyes reflecting gold. The ground is swept. A skin hangs near the entrance to stop the draft. In the center, a small pot pops. Outside, a night voice calls and falls quiet. You can taste smoke and fat and a little ash. This is the room where our story grows from embers. Humanity did not step into the world as a sudden roar. Our path was long and braided, upright walkers roaming sunlit grasslands, toolmakers cracking stone with bone and fire, coastal foragers learning the rhythms of tides and moons. Yet our lane widens after upheaval. When larger forms thinned, space opened. When climates jumped, versatility paid. We were born from a set of left-behind chances, and we learned to stack them. Hands are our first quiet miracle. A thumb that meets fingers with precision turns rock into blade, bark into cord, branch into spear, fiber into basket. The hand is a workshop that fits in a pocket. Fire is our second. Control of heat makes old food safe, soft, and shareable. It pushes predators back from the glow and pulls people close to exchange ideas. Once warmth lives in the camp, nights lengthen into classrooms. Brains followed, but not as trophies. A bigger brain eats a lot. It costs more than muscle. To be worth the price, it must bring returns. Stored roots, flexible diets, craft that lasts, stories that coordinate many bodies at once. Scarcity sharpened those returns. Hard years are tutors. They force long planning and careful sharing. The clan that turns memory into maps, and maps into rituals, wins winters. Ask researchers for the scaffolding, and they'll point to pieces that lock together. Endurance. Hunting on hot plains. Cooperative childcare that frees older siblings to learn. Divided labor that lets expertise form. Language that packs meaning into small sounds. Trade networks that move stone and shell many days' walk from their sources. Add coastal refuges during cold pulses. Shelves rich with shellfish keeping groups alive when inland game grows thin. And the ledger starts to balance. Edges of thought extend farther. Some propose a narrow bottleneck in our past when numbers fell so low that luck could have erased us. Survival there might explain our strange unity as a species and our appetite for risk. Others suggest that we learned to domesticate fire not just for cooking, but for landscape. Setting cool burns that kept prairies open and drew grazers near, shaping ecosystems long before farms. A few even wonder whether stories themselves were tools honed by selection. Those who held attention with cautionary tales kept more children alive than those who could not. Sit by the cave's entry. The night is bright with its own lights. A family shares the last portion. Someone hums a line without words. Another answers. The melody settles the children, so the adults can speak. They trade news. A spring gone. Dry. A tree heavy with fruit. A set of tracks too large to follow. They plan the morning by telling a story of a morning long ago that ended well. Inside that story hides a map. We are the child of catastrophe in another sense. Our rise depended on the quiet success of small mammals that outlived giants long before we were possible. Warm blood, parental care, sharp senses, flexible diets. These gifts were purchased in ages when the sky went dark and the ground froze. We inherited those suits and tailored them with speech and fire. The fire was not ours first. The memory was not ours first. We are a continuation that learned to call itself a beginning. How much of us is shaped by what came before? Look at the flames. They sway in a pattern the wind writes. They also hold steady because someone stacked wood the right way. We depend on the world's moods, and we arrange them when we can. That desire, to shape, to steer, to predict, makes shelters, calendars, and finally cities. It also gives a new power to old fears. The coals ease toward red. Outside, frost begins to lace the grass. Dawn will find footprints at the cave mouth, heading toward a ridge where the sky opens. Up there, the line between story and sky is thin. Our kind has always stood in that place, connecting dots with meaning and caution, drawing lines where none were asked for. One set of lines shines brightest on certain nights. Bright tales, sudden flares, cold stones that turn hot in the air. Lift your eyes. The next lesson travels on a streak of white across black, a riverbank after sunset. Water gathers stars and carries them in silence. Then a high call. Someone points. A green spark blooms and falls, then another, then a shower. Heads tilt back, mouths open without sound. Even the oldest among you go still, as if hearing a language the chest remembers before the tongue. Human stories are heavy with sky fire. A reckless charioteer scorches the world and is cast down. A serpent with a tail of light brings famine. A god throws stones so bright that day hides. A sister collects sparks in a basket and scatters them as reminders. Some of these tales are warnings about pride. Some are calendars for meteor showers that return with the year. Some carry something else, a serrated edge of memory that cuts deeper than any one-night spectacle. What does the ground say? Craters pock the continents and the seas. Iron-rich rocks lie in places where no volcano can explain them. Thin, layers of glassy beads and shocked quartz mark ancient days when air screamed. In our era, we have also watched near misses, felt far booms, and read accounts of forests flattened by a blast over Siberia that left no crater at all. The sky does not always visit kindly. Do any of our stories reach past human experience toward older events? Some point to a late glacial cold snap when climates lurched, megafauna thinned, and people shifted habits. A group of researchers has floated a bold idea. A swarm of fragments from a broken comet may have lit the sky and troubled the climate. Others push back, saying the evidence can be read another way. Fires from dry grasslands, not cosmic sparks. Cold from ocean currents, not debris. The debate runs like two rivers beside each other, and both ask good questions. Beyond that, older catastrophes, like the strike that closed the age of dinosaurs, sit far outside the reach of human memory. No living mouth could pass those days along in a straight line. Still, some patterns might echo. The returning path of a meteor stream across millennia could train cultures to watch certain months with extra care. A cluster of mid-sized impacts over many centuries could keep fear alive without any one strike becoming a legend's sole source. Stone can errand the tale. Petroglyphs of radiant wheels, speckled serpents, and starbursts appear in deserts and highlands around the world, carved by hands that had no telescope but plenty of nights to think. Science and story do not always argue here. Sometimes they nod. Shepherds lay out lambing times under skies they know. Sailors angle rigs for winds that follow stars. Farmers read planting from the moon. When a fireball rattles windows, the newspapers borrow words from myth, bolide, draconid, leonid, families, of stone named for constellations drawn by a Greek hand. We live between calculation and awe, and the sky trains both. Stand with your back against an old boulder etched with circles and lines. The stone is cool. A tale whispers down the generations. Once, the heavens lost a tooth. It fell, and the ground shook. In the morning, the fish came to shore dead. The elders forbade anyone from touching the shiny pebbles. Such tales are both caution and archive. They teach children not to run toward light, not to fill pockets with gifts from ash, not to drink water that smells like eggs after a mountain coughs sparks. Could the night stories, told long enough, carry an echo of extinctions no person saw? Not as dates, but as posture, a readiness for sudden change, a trained humility before streak and boom, an instinct to look up when animals go silent. The value is not in proving a line from dinosaur days to campfire yarns. It is in understanding that we are built to hear the sky when it speaks too loudly. A final flare tears a line and fades. The group lowers their heads together, a small choreography humans have performed for longer than history. You return to embers, to bread, to sleep. The sky keeps the rest. When morning comes, the chorus of birds will fold the night shut. Their notes are not only welcome, they are a kind of memorial. Dawn opens like a slow breath in a forest washed with mist. Drops cling to needles and drip with lazy patience. A low light turns webs into necklaces between twigs. From somewhere near, a thrush releases a line of notes as delicate as glass. Another voice answers from deeper green, then another, then many. The air fills with small bells. You feel the sound on your skin before you name it. Pause here. After the great fall of the old rulers, the mornings must have sounded different, quieter, emptied of wing beats as wide as sails, free of grating calls that once announced a sky lord's curve. The hush that followed was heavy. It held grief you cannot measure. Out of that hush, one thread grew stronger day by day. Soft feathered bodies stepping into light, testing branches, warming eggs, teaching songs. Birds are not heirs in name only. They carry bones with air inside, arms that became wings, legs that grip bark with a memory of claws. Yet more than anatomy moved into the new day. The habits of small survivors, adapt, try, learn, share, turned into music. Each note is a claim. I am here. Each duet is a treaty. I belong. Each chorus is an index of health. This patch of world still works. Most researchers describe it as a practical triumph. Voices define territories, save energy by avoiding fights, attract mates with evidence of fitness. Youngsters learn local dialects, and the forest becomes a patchwork of accents that can shift with environment. Where branches thin or thicken, songs adjust. Where wind roars, rhythm slow and pitch drops. Where predators listen, singers hide their nests and change their timing. This is not only beauty, it is engineering. Ideas beyond the usual add a layer. Some listeners claim morning songs also soothe the nervous system, animal and human alike, dampening alarms after a night full of unknowns. Others study how certain frequencies travel far with little energy and suspect that forests themselves guide. The evolution of scales. Dense leaves prefer one sort of note, open savanna another. A few storytellers say the first dawn after a long winter would have sounded like a memorial service for all that was lost, and that traces of that feeling remain in minor notes that tug at the chest. Walk a shaded path. Leaves exhale the nights. Wetness. A wren flares from a stump, scolds, and vanishes. A nuthatch walks headfirst down a trunk, taps, and pulls a pale larva into the light. Up in the canopy, a cuckoo trades clockwork phrases with itself, a duet for one voice that travels like a stitched seam across the wood. In the understory, something small rustles and stops. This is a conversation with many speakers, and you are allowed to listen. Silence still lives here too. The gaps between notes mean as much as the notes. In those pauses, your ear remembers rooms that no longer exist. Fern savannas under a dim sun. Coastlines scoured by firestorm winds. Valleys where ice rasped bedrock into powder. The quiet between trills feels like the breath the world took after the strike. Every morning chorus, then, is both rehearsal and requiem. It announces a day and honors all days that failed. It also instructs. Young birds learn their kind's language by listening at dawn. Young humans learn the planet's schedule by waking to it. Where the songs grow thin or vanish, something underneath has changed. Water, insects, shelter, air. Early warning comes with feathers. What does this ancient hush still say to us? Bend closer. It says that life returned by stacking small voices until they sounded like a river. It says that a world can lose its largest actors and still write a play you would pay to hear. It says that, when the sky goes quiet, the ground learns harmony. The mist lifts. Sun touches the highest leaves first, then the middle, then the path. The choir shifts to daytime chores, feeding, building, teaching. You step from shade into a clearing and feel the day choose heat. The silence you carry is not empty. It is thick with reminders and instructions. Beyond this grove, a different room waits. Labs full of bones and dust, shelves lined with core samples, servers humming with satellite images. Another kind of song rises there. Data and argument, charts and sketches, voices trying to braid story and measurement without tearing either. The next chapter walks into that room, lays the field's hush on the table and asks what we still do not see. What does the morning ask of us now? Listen, then answer in deeds. The forest will keep speaking while we learn the words. Fluorescent. Lamps hum over long tables. Trays of bones lie in tidy rows beside brushes and labels that read like poems. Locality, horizon, depth. A magnifier lens swings into place. Under glass, a tooth's enamel shines like old porcelain. Across the hall, a thin section of rock glows violet in a microscope, grains locked together by pressure and patience. In the next building, telescopes idle beneath their domes, awaiting darkness. Radio dishes listen to the sky's faint hiss. Human hands move everywhere, dusting, weighing, logging, arguing softly. The room feels like a chapel where silence works. We know more than ever, and yet when the lights go off, certainty slips through the cracks like fine sand. The closer the lens, the more the edges blur. A fossil says, "Here I was," but not always how I lived. A cratering field says impact, but not always how many, how fast, how long the night. A climate curve says cooling, then warming, but not where a mother hid her young, which branch held the nest, what the first day of rain smelled like after years of ash. Accepted research draws a strong outline. The rock record charts a boundary marked by iridium and shocked quartz. Core samples hold bubbles of ancient air, ratios of gases that sing of past suns. Isotope curves sketch cold snaps and fever spikes. We sequence DNA to build family trees and calibrate them with dates pulled from volcanic ash layers. Across disciplines, clocks agree better than they used to. The story tightens. Yet, even in neat graphs, shadows remain. Some layers lie disturbed, folded, faulted, reworked by rivers that scribbled the margins. Ages can smear. Local disasters can masquerade as global ones. Preservation favors some faces and forgets others. Small, soft creatures often vanish without a note, while the durable and the lucky crowd the archive. We read with a bias we can only partly remove. That's where memory steps in, fallible, vivid, stubborn. Oral histories store storms and starfalls in rhythms a child can hold. A grandmother points to a ridgeline and tells of a winter that lasted 2 harvests. A fisherman repeats the rule his father gave him. When the sea runs away, run. Up the hill. A shepherd knows the week the sky will throw fire and schedules lambing around it. Story keeps people alive when instruments are far away. But story bends to the teller and to fear. It compresses decades into a night, stretches a local flood into a world. So the lab and the fire circle meet and compare maps. Sometimes they fit. Tsunami boulders left high on slopes pair with songs about waves that climbed the mouth of a valley. Charcoal-rich horizons match tales of a time when the wind rained sparks. A star catalog's note on a recurring meteor stream coincides with a festival that welcomes the returning stones. Other times the fit is messy. A village legend blames a crater on a sky god's spear. The rock says it woke 1,000,000 years before humans. Both can be true in a way. The whole is a god now because the god is the whole. On the far counter, a laptop plays a model. Continents arranged as they were. Winds coursing, aerosols circling. Each second on the screen swallows years. The machine shows nights without sun, days washed in orange light, ice spreading from poles like slow breath. Models help us test cause and effect. What if the volcanoes were stronger? What if the impact arrived during a cooler season? What if ocean belts paused for longer? But even models borrow assumptions that later change. We chase the past with tools that improve while we run. Fringe ideas haunt the doorways, sometimes as sparks worth catching. Did broken comet fragments pepper the planet over centuries rather than one day? Did methane belch from frozen seabeds under a jolt, turning a sharp winter into a long chill? Did a chain of smaller strikes add to smoke from far-off lava fields, tipping a world already near the edge? These proposals draw criticism, refinement, and, occasionally, evidence. The good ones either stand or evolve. The others feed the compost pile of thought from which better thoughts grow. Museums hold another truth. Everything we know depends on what we drag into the light. A drawer once ignored yields a jaw that rewrites a lineage's timeline. A student remeasures an old specimen and finds a trait everyone missed. A farmer plows up a stone full of fish bones in a place no map expected fossils, and a new site breathes. Knowledge advances not just by theory but by boots and shovels and luck. In the observatory, a technician tunes a receiver to a cold patch of sky. The dish drinks starlight turned to whisper. Somewhere out there, dust births worlds. Somewhere in rock under our feet, dust remembers the last time the sky fell. Between those scales, we place ourselves, a species that reads and dreams, that spells the past with shards and the future with warnings. We could be misreading parts of the record even now. Perhaps a signature we call fire came from peat smoldering through a century, not a single day. Perhaps creatures we believe vanished persisted in the shadows for longer than our layers can resolve. Perhaps the climate's return to warmth wore a staircase, not a ramp, and our instruments blur the steps. These doubts are not failure. They are fuel. Questions make the next expedition worth the blister and the grant. You step into the hallway. A case holds a thin line of clay from a cliff in Italy. Dark, unassuming, famous. Next to it sits a vial of glass beads the size of coarse sand, tektites that fell like rain. Across from them, a child presses a hand to the glass, eyes wide. The distance between that hand and the beads is the distance between memory and evidence. We need both to feel the shape of truth. What if we are still misreading the fossils of time? Then the work is not over. Then the listening continues. Then we take our lamps back into the stacks and dust off the next shelf. Out beyond the lab walls, the air smells of pine and smoke. Sirens wail somewhere. Rivers are low where they should be high. Elsewhere, the banks are gone. The past clears its throat in the present. The doors open. Daylight floods the corridor like an answer we have not learned to ask. The next section walks outside, where the old rhythms return under new names. A satellite view steals your breath. White crowns at the poles bleed blue along their edges. Forests flash like fuse lines. One week green, the next a patchwork of char. Storm spirals cover oceans, their eyes calm as coins. Heat waves spread copper haze over cities. Rivers kink and go slack, then break their banks and erase highways as if they were chalk. The screen changes scale. A firefighter's helmet mirror reflects a wall of flame. A glacier's face shears away and crashes into a gray lake, and the lake rolls a new shore. The planet speaks in old accents with modern urgency. Once an impact flipped the table. Today we flip it ourselves. Slower, with many hands, through fossil fuels burned in a century rather than rocks burned in a second. Still, the tune is familiar. More heat in the air, more moisture. Storms sharper, droughts deeper. The hard, lean of sea on sand. Creatures moving poleward and uphill. Corals paling. Timing breaking. The bees early, the flowers late. The warning inside the dinosaur story was not about a specific rock. It was about fragility that hides under confidence. Accepted. Research draws the present with steady lines. Greenhouse gases trap outgoing heat. The numbers rise because we dig and burn what was buried. Measurements catch the world trying to reach a new balance. Oceans swell from warmth and meltwater. Jet streams meander. Fire seasons lengthen. Permafrost exhales old carbon as it thaws. Species shift ranges or shrink. Some keep up, some don't. The collage looks like a time-lapse of a home rearranging itself while we sleep. Other ideas hover at the edges. Will feedbacks kick harder than we expect? Forests switching from sink to source after repeated burns. Methane bubbling from thaw lakes in pulses that change the math. Ice shelves cracking at stress lines we cannot yet see from the surface. Or will other feedbacks quietly help? Dust from drying basins brightening clouds. New kelp forests drawing down carbon in coasts that used to be too cold for them. Cities planting belts of shade that cool urban winds. Our forecasts improve, yet the future keeps a few cards face down. Myth has already adapted its script. In Fire Country, new stories explain red skies to children and add a clause to old rules. Prepare a bag, memorize a route, trust the neighbor who still has water. Along coasts, elders refine an old chant. When the sea runs away, run uphill. And now also, when the sea climbs without warning, run higher than you thought. On islands, songs teach the names of years when storms hit wrong, and the smell of the one. Air the night before. We are rehearsing. We always have been. Walk a river that knows two opposite fates. In spring it shrinks to a puzzle of pools, fish trapped like commas in the gravel. In autumn it swells into a sheet that forgets the channel. Along its banks willows throw new roots and old ones die. A heron hunts in both seasons, changing spot and stance, patience the only steady tool. A child throws a stick. It sits, then races, then sits again. That stick is a calendar. We are not dinosaurs, and no single ash veil will fall from the sky because of us. but we can corner ourselves under a roof of our own smoke. The lesson from the past is not despair, it is consequence. The giants fell because their world changed faster than their bodies could adapt. Our bodies do not need to adapt to heat the way theirs did. Our systems do. Energy, water, food, transport, story. And system change begins with choices. What we burn, what we build, where we sleep, which shorelines we insist on owning, which forests we let grow old enough to fight fire with shade and moisture, which rivers we give room to wobble. Technology is a chorus, not a soloist. Solar and wind, roofs that drink light and hills that catch air, cut fuel from the fire. Grids grow smarter, balancing clouds with batteries, calms with currents. Concrete thins and mixes with ash that used to be waste. Steel drinks hydrogen instead of coal. Even ships test new winds. None of these wins the whole war. Together they adjust the weather of our choices. Culture, too, turns knobs. Diets shift a little toward plants. Fields grow more cover in winter. Wetlands take back acres from stubborn levees. Cities paint more roofs light and plant more trees dark. Fisherfolk change quotas when reefs bleach. Farmers swap varieties when rains slide on the calendar. These acts look small until they accrete like coral, polyps building rooms that slowly become a cliff. Are we standing in the same kind of hush the dinosaurs once knew? The moment before a slope gives way, before the sky goes from bruised to black? Not quite, and yet the feeling rhymes. A knowledge that momentum over our heads dwarfs us, a sense that the ground under our feet belongs to longer cycles than any single life. The difference is agency. We carry matches and maps, excavators and laws, satellites and stories. We can leave some fossil fuels where they rest. We can rebuild in safer places and learn to love them. We can let rivers breathe and forests age, and coasts recover some marsh we stole. The camera pulls back again, into orbit. City lights bead the night side. Lightning threads cloud fields. A thin blue line arcs between black ground and black space. That line is the air we teach with our decisions. The past is not asking us to be heroes. It is asking us to be good editors. What if we are standing in the same silence the dinosaurs once did? Then the next note matters more than the last chorus. Then the closing section of this film is not closure at all, but a threshold you can feel in your ribs. The sea at night holds the stars. Let's go there. Night sprawls over an open coast. Waves roll like slow breaths, patterned and patient, each one writing a silver line that blurs as soon as it's made. Out beyond the breakers, the ocean is black glass, scattered with cold fire. Stars riding in the water, upside down and quivering. Far across the bay, a lighthouse writes its pulse. The world is quiet enough to hear small stones lift and settle at the water's edge. Extinction sits here, not as a scream, but as a door that never rusts. It can open on any night, for any species. It has opened many times and will open again. The contradiction that holds you still is simple and unsettling. This door belongs to yesterday and tomorrow at once. It is an end that makes room. It is a loss that has always been part of the budget of life. Walk the tide line. Under your feet lie shards of shell and beads of glass worn soft by sand. On the rack of weed lie seeds that traveled countries on current alone. Every piece speaks future. Even the dead feed next season's bloom. The age of dinosaurs ended. Dawn kept coming. In the mute fields after that night, ferns woke, birds tried their first brave phrases, mammals rehearsed patience, and minds began to store more than fear. From that ledger of recoveries we arrived, a creature that can watch the sky and call stones by names the sky cannot hear, a creature that can feel sadness for animals gone 2 continents away, a creature that can ask a wave to keep it company while it thinks. So the last question is not whether endings come, they do. It is what we seed across our ending even while we live. What tools do we leave in the drawer for hands we will never hold? What stories do we send forward that teach where high water marks hide? Which forests do we grant the centuries they need to become teachers of rain? Which reefs do we protect long enough to turn larvae into walls? How many languages do we keep breathing so the land can hear itself in many voices? Accepted research gives us ranges and risks, pathways and thresholds. But in the dark, beside the sea, another knowledge rises, the kind that braided caves to camps to cities. Keep watch, share warmth, store food, move when the ground says move, tie the boat high, teach the young the smell of good water, teach them where to stand when the sea runs back. Teach them that the sky has seasons of stone and fire, and that none of those seasons last forever. Fringe hopes live here too, and some may sprout. Rewilded corridors that let herds and storms pass without. Breaking towns, roofs that drink light and houses that sleep cool without hunger for oil. Rivers that wriggle like eels again. Farms that keep skin on the soil and carbon in the ground. Floating forests of kelp anchored to lines that hum with current. Cities that hear birds at dawn as lessons rather than noise. These are not fantasies. They are drafts. We are the first animal to hold so many drafts at once. Myth will not stand aside. It will take our choices and give them shape. A new rope story will teach a child in a coastal town. A lullaby in a heat-tired city will name the wind that saves power. A winter tale in a farming valley will praise the beaver as a rainmaker. Cultures will write the tools into songs so they don't get lost when the batteries run out. Stand still and let the surf ride on your ankles. The questions you brought here soften, not because they were wrong, but because the answers turn out to be verbs. Build, mend, learn, share, leave room, trust quiet work, honor old maps, write new ones. If life began again after the dinosaurs, what begins after us? Honest answer, something will. The planet does not pledge itself to any single caste. But a better question keeps you human. What begins because of us, not merely after? Forests that remember our hands as helpful. Rivers that run muddier for a season, then clear for a century. Birds whose morning scales carry a hint of our care in their echoes. Children who know where the rope hangs when the sea takes a long breath before running. The sea breathes in. The sea breathes out. The stars feather and break on a small wave, and reform on the next. Far down the coast, a campfire blooms and shrinks. Someone tells a story, someone listens, someone ties a knot. The earth turns with the patience of stone. In that turning, endings and beginnings take their turns like waves. You are part of the chorus now. One voice, soft but real, among many. The film does not fade to black. It fades to blue-black, the color of old water under new sky. Keep a hand on the rope. Teach the next hand where it lies. And walk home with the tide in your ears, carrying a question that glows without burning. If we give the future room, what beautiful, careful thing will step through?